Our story begins with Dave Maren, a 58-year-old financial analyst living in Fishers, Indiana. Dave was a hardworking man known for his smart mind and calm demeanor. He lived with his second wife, Vivy, and had 2 adult children from his first marriage, Jason and Lana. Dave was well respected in his community and had a stable job that he loved. Dave graduated from Indiana University with a degree in finance. He had a successful career working for a well-known financial firm in Indianapolis. Despite his busy work schedule, Dave always made time for his family. He enjoyed playing chess with his friends at the local chess club and reading mystery novels by authors like Agatha Christie and Arthur Conan Doyle. His favorite book was The Hound of the Baskervilles. Dave's personality was warm and kind. He was always there to help his friends and family. His children, Jason and Lana, loved him dearly. Jason, 25, was trying to find his way in the world and had a complicated relationship with his father. Lana, 24, admired her father and often saw his advice for her event-playing business. In the days before his death, Dave was excited about the upcoming Christmas holiday. He looked forward to spending time with his family and had already bought gifts for everyone. Dave's favorite part of the holiday season was decorating the Christmas tree and watching classic Christmas movies like It's a Wonderful Life and Die Hard. He enjoyed the festive atmosphere and loved seeing the joy on his family's faces. On December 20, 2007, Dave was planning to attend a Christmas party of his office. He was in good spirits and had even picked out a special tie with Santa Claus on it. Dave's last few days were filled with joy and anticipation as he made plans to celebrate Christmas with his loved ones. Dave's friends and colleagues remember him as a dedicated and generous person. His sudden death shocked everyone who knew him. The news of his passing was covered by the local media, and many people in the community mourned his loss. Dave's life seemed perfect on the outside, but he was unaware of the dark secrets that would soon come to light. On the morning of December 21, 2007, it was a cold and cloudy day in Fishers, Indiana. Snowflakes gently fell from the sky, covering the ground in the light dusting of white. Inside the Maren home, the Christmas decorations sparkled with festive lights, and a soft holiday tune played on the radio. Lana Maren, Dave's 24-year-old daughter, woke up early. She planned to finish some work for her event-playing business before meeting a friend for lunch at the local Applebee's. As she walked down the stairs, she noticed that her father, Dave, wasn't up yet. It was unusual because Dave was always an early riser. Concerned, Lana went to the living room, where she found her father lying on the couch. At first, she thought he was asleep. She called out to him softly, "Dad, it's time to wake up." But Dave didn't move. Lana approached him and gently shook his shoulder. When he still didn't respond, she noticed his skin was cold to the touch. Panic began to set in. Lana's heart raced as she checked for a pulse, but there was none. Overwhelmed with fear and confusion, she called 911. "My dad is not breathing. I think he's dead," she cried, her voice trembling. The dispatcher assured her that help was on the way. Within minutes, emergency responders arrived at the scene. The paramedics confirmed that Dave was dead. Lana was in shock and disbelief, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't understand how her father, who had been healthy and happy just the day before, could be gone. Detective Billy Pestian, a seasoned investigator with the Fishers Police Department, was called to the scene. He observed the living room, noting the cozy, festive setting. Dave's body was lying peacefully on the couch, with no visible signs of trauma. At first glance, it appeared to be a natural death. The news of Dave's sudden passing quickly spread through the community. Friends and neighbors gathered outside the Maren home, whispering in hushed tones. The local news station, WTHR Channel 13, reported on Dave's death, highlighting his contributions to the community and his loving family. Lana's discovery of her father's body was a heartbreaking moment that left her in a state of shock. She couldn't comprehend the loss and kept replaying the events in her mind. The once joyful holiday season had turned into a time of mourning and sorrow for the Maren family. On December 21, 2007, Detective Billy Pestian arrived promptly at the Maren home after receiving the emergency call. It was a cold and cloudy morning with a light dusting of snow on the ground. Detective Pestian was known for his meticulous attention to detail and calm demeanor. The living room was decorated with festive Christmas lights and a beautifully adorned tree. The scene seemed peaceful, but Detective Pestian sensed something was off. Dave Maren's body lay on the couch, appearing as if he had peacefully fallen asleep. There were no signs of a struggle or any visible injuries. The first responders were already there, and the paramedics had confirmed Dave's death. Detective Pestian began his investigation by carefully examining the room. He noticed a teacup on the coffee table next to Dave, which seemed out of place given the circumstances. He instructed the forensic team to collect the teacup and any other potential evidence for further analysis. Detective Pestian then turned his attention to Lana, who was still in shock and being comforted by a neighbor. He gently asked her about the events leading up to the discovery of her father's body. Lana explained that she had found him that morning and immediately called 911. She mentioned that Dave had seemed perfectly fine the night before and had even been looking forward to the office Christmas party. As the investigation continued, Detective Pestian called in the coroner to conduct a preliminary examination of Dave's body. The coroner, Dr. Susan Mancoro, was an experienced professional known for her thoroughness. She noted that while there were no external injuries, Dave's skin had an unusual discoloration. Dr. Taylor suspected poisoning and took samples for toxicology testing. As the day progressed, Detective Pestian received a call from the lab. The preliminary toxicology report indicated the presence of a rare toxin in Dave's system, confirming Dr. Mancoro's suspicion. This discovery changed the course of the investigation, turning it from a potential natural death to a suspected homicide. The first suspect in the case was Vivy Markerson Greaves, Dave's 19-year-old second wife. Vivy was known for her charm and sociable nature. She worked as an event planner and was well-liked in her community. Vivy often organized memorable events and was known for her attention to detail. However, beneath her friendly exterior, Vivy had a complicated personal life. Detective Billy Pestian and his team arrived at Vivy's office, a local event planning business in Fishers, Indiana. The office was decorated for the holidays with bright lights and festive decorations. Vivy greeted them with a warm smile, but the detectives noticed a hint of nervousness in her eyes. They asked her to come to the station for questioning. At the police station, Detective Pestian began the interrogation. Vivy seemed calm but cautious. She explained that she had spent the previous evening at home with Dave, watching Hallmark movies and enjoying a quiet night in. When asked about her relationship with Dave, Vivy described it as loving and supportive. However, Detective Pestian pressed further, mentioning rumors of an affair between Vivy and her stepson, Jason. Vivy's demeanor changed slightly. She denied any romantic involvement with Jason, insisting they were just close due to their shared love for event planning. Despite her calm exterior, Vivy's answers were often vague and evasive. The detectives knew they needed more concrete evidence. As the questioning continued, Detective Pestian asked Vivy about the teacup found next to Dave's body. Vivy hesitated before explaining that it was part of their nightly routine for Dave to drink tea before bed. She insisted that she had no idea how the toxin could have gotten into the tea. Her answers seemed rehearsed, and Detective Pestian noted her increasing nervousness. The motive for Vivy was becoming clearer. If she was indeed having an affair with Jason, Dave's death could free her from a loveless marriage and allow her to be with Jason openly. The detectives also discovered financial records showing that Dave had a substantial life insurance policy, with Vivy as the beneficiary. Despite Vivy's calm demeanor, her vague answers and potential motives made her a prime suspect. Detective Pestian knew they needed more evidence to either confirm or rule out her involvement in Dave's death. The investigation into Vivy Markerson Greaves was just beginning, and the detectives were determined to uncover the truth behind the murder. As the detectives continued their investigation, they knew they had to dig deeper into Vivy's personal life and her relationship with Jason. The next steps would involve interviewing more people and looking for any inconsistencies in Vivy's story. But truth was out there, and Detective Pestian and his team were committed to finding it. The second suspect in the case was Jason Marcherson, Dave's 25-year-old son. Jason was known for his sharp mind and resourcefulness. He had a complicated relationship with his father and had spent some time in a mental facility. Jason had recently developed a romantic relationship with his stepmother, Vivy, which made him a prime suspect. Detective Billy Pestian and his team arrived at Jason's apartment in downtown Indianapolis. Jason greeted them with a wary look, aware of the gravity of the situation. The detectives asked him to come to the station for questioning. At the police station, Detective Pestian began the interrogation. Jason seemed calm but guarded. He explained that he had been at his apartment the night before Dave's death, working on a project. When asked about his relationship with his father, Jason admitted that they had their differences but insisted that he would never harm him. Detective Pestian then brought up the rumors of Jason's affair with Vivy. Jason's calm demeanor faltered slightly. He admitted to having feelings for Vivy, but denied any involvement in Dave's death. He claimed that their relationship was consensual and that they had planned to talk to Dave about it after the holidays. The detectives pressed further, asking Jason about his recent financial troubles. Jason revealed that he had been struggling with an addiction to marijuana and had been borrowing money from his father to support his habit. He also admitted that he had been blackmailing Vivy for money, threatening to expose their affair if she didn't pay him. The motive for Jason was becoming clearer. If Dave were out of the picture, Jason could potentially gain access to more money and continue his relationship with Vivy without fear of exposure. The detectives also discovered that Jason had recently purchased a large quantity of the rare toxin found in Dave's system. Despite his calm exterior, Jason's admissions and potential motives made him a prime suspect. Detective Pestian knew they needed more evidence to either confirm or rule out his involvement in Dave's death. The investigation into Jason Marcherson was just beginning, and the detectives were determined to uncover the truth. As the detectives continued their investigation, they knew they had to dig deeper into Jason's personal life and his relationship with Vivy. The next steps would involve interviewing more people and looking for any inconsistencies in Jason's story. The truth was out there, and Detective Pestian and his team were committed to finding it. The detectives left no stone unturned, ensuring that every detail was examined and every lead followed. They were determined to bring justice for Dave Marcherson and uncover the true story behind his tragic death. On December 23, 2007, just 2 days before Christmas, the weather in Fishers, Indiana, was cold and overcast. Detective Billy Pestian received a call that would change the course of the investigation. New evidence had been found in Dave Marcherson's home. The discovery provided a crucial breakthrough in the case. Earlier that morning, a neighbor had noticed something unusual while walking her dog. She saw an envelope sticking out from under a flower pot on the Marchersons' porch. Curious, she picked it up and saw that it was addressed to Detective Pestian. The neighbor immediately called the police, and Detective Pestian rushed to the scene. The envelope contained a letter and a small vial. The letter was unsigned but provided detailed information about the rare toxin found in Dave's system. The writer claimed to know who the killer was and provided specific details about how the toxin had been acquired and used. The letter also mentioned a hidden stash of documents in the Marchersons' attic that would reveal the true motive behind the murder. Detective Pestian and his team quickly obtained a warrant to search the attic. Inside, they found a lockbox. Using tools to carefully open it, they discovered several important documents, including financial records, personal letters, and a detailed plan outlining how the murder was to be carried out. The documents pointed to a well-planned conspiracy. Among the papers was a receipt for the purchase of the rare toxin, dated 2 months before Dave's death. The name on the receipt was Lana Marcherson, Dave's 24-year-old daughter. The detectives were shocked by this revelation, as Lana had not been a primary suspect up until this point. The new evidence painted a different picture of the crime. Detective Pestian and his team reviewed the documents thoroughly, uncovering Lana's hidden motives. The letters revealed her deep jealousy over Jason's relationship with Vivy and her desire to remove her father from the picture to gain control over the family's finances and the event planning business she co-owned with Vivy. The police responded to this new evidence by calling Lana in for further questioning. When confronted with the documents, Lana's demeanor changed from cooperative to defensive. She denied any involvement at first, but eventually broke down under pressure, revealing the extent of her involvement in the plot. Detective Pestian knew they were getting closer to solving the case. The new evidence provided a clear motive and linked Lana directly to the crime. The police continued to gather more information, determined to bring justice to Dave Marcherson's tragic death. The third suspect in the case was Lana Marcherson, Dave's 24-year-old daughter. Lana was a pragmatic and ambitious young woman who co-owned an event planning business with Vivy. She was known for her hard work and dedication, and she was fiercely loyal to Vivy. However, her jealousy and complex emotions added a layer of intrigue to the case. On December 24, 2007, Detective Billy Pestian and his team called Lana in for further questioning. It was Christmas Eve, and the weather outside was cold with a light snow falling. The festive decorations at the police station stood in stark contrast to the serious atmosphere of the interrogation room. Lana arrived at the station, visibly nervous but trying to maintain her composure. Detective Pestian began the interrogation by asking Lana about her relationship with her father. Lana described her father as loving and supportive, but admitted they have their differences, especially regarding the family business and her personal life. When Detective Keston brought up the newly discovered documents, Lana's demeanor shifted. She became defensive, denying any involvement in her father's death. However, the detectives presented her with the receipt for the rare toxin, which bore her name. The evidence was overwhelming, and Lana's story began to unravel. Lana eventually confessed to her part in the plot. She admitted to feeling jealous of her brother Jason's relationship with Vivy and her father's control over the family's finances. Lana saw an opportunity to gain control over the business and her father's estate by eliminating it. She had supplied Vivy with the rare toxin, encouraging her to use it to poison Dave. The detectives were stunned by Lana's cold and calculated confession. She revealed how she had manipulated both Vivy and Jason to achieve her goals. Her jealousy and ambition had driven her to commit a heinous crime, betraying her own family in the process. Lana's motive became clear. She wanted to remove her father from the picture to gain financial control and to keep Vivy for herself. Her unrequited love for Vivy and jealousy of Jason's relationship with her fueled her actions. Lana's confession provided the final piece of the puzzle, linking her directly to the crime and revealing her as the true mastermind behind the murder. Detective Keston and his team were now confident they had uncovered the full extent of the plot. Lana's detailed confession, along with the physical evidence, provided a clear picture of her involvement. The investigation into Lana Marcherson revealed a chilling tale of jealousy, manipulation, and betrayal, bringing them closer to solving the tragic case. On December 25, 2007, the weather in Fishers, Indiana, was cold and snowy. It was Christmas morning, and the town was quiet. Detective Billy Pestion and his team had gathered enough evidence to identify the murderer. The killer was Vivy Marcherson, Dave's 19-year-old wife. Her motives were a mix of desperation to escape her loveless marriage and a desire to be with her stepson, Jason. Vivy's plan was meticulously crafted. She had purchased a rare toxin with the help of Lana, Dave's daughter. Vivy then mixed the poison into Dave's favorite evening tea. The poison caused a slow and painful death, which initially appeared natural due to its subtle symptoms. Vivy thought she had planned the perfect crime, but the evidence told a different story. Detective Pestion reviewed the evidence one last time before heading to the Marcherson home to make the arrest. Vivy had become the primary suspect after Lana's confession. The detailed plan found in the attic, the toxicology report, and the receipt for the rare toxin all pointed to Vivy's involvement. The detectives were ready to bring her to justice. As Detective Pestion and his team approached the Marcherson home, they saw the festive Christmas lights twinkling. Despite the holiday cheer, the atmosphere was tense. The detectives knocked on the door, and Vivy answered, her face showing a mix of surprise and fear. "Vivy Marcherson, you are under arrest for the murder of Dave Marcherson," Detective Keston announced. Vivy was shocked, but quickly composed herself. She was handcuffed and led to the police car, her neighbors watching in disbelief. At the police station, Vivy was questioned again. This time, with all the evidence laid out before her, she broke down and confessed. She admitted to poisoning Dave to be with Jason and escape her unhappy marriage. She also revealed that Jason had been blackmailing her for money to support his drug addiction. Feeling trapped and betrayed, Vivy had hoped that confessing might bring her some leniency. The reaction from Dave's family was a mix of relief and sorrow. His children, Jason and Lana, were devastated by the betrayal and loss. The neighbors and friends who had known the Marchersons were shocked to learn the truth. The small town of Fishers, Indiana, was rocked by the news of the murder and the dark secrets that had come to light. Vivy's arrest brought a sense of closure to the investigation. Detective Pestion and his team had worked tirelessly to uncover the truth. The case was a stark reminder of how jealousy and desperation could lead to tragic consequences. As Vivy was taken away, the town began to heal, knowing that justice had been served. The trial of Vivy Marcherson began on February 10, 2008, in Fishers, Indiana. The courtroom was filled with reporters, family members, and curious locals. The weather was cold and snowy, reflecting the somber mood inside. The prosecutor, Malia Jacobs-Chan, a 45-year-old seasoned attorney known for her determination and sharp wit, presented the case against Vivy. Malia Jacobs-Chan laid out the evidence methodically, explaining how Vivy had purchased the rare toxin with the help of Lana and used it to poison her husband, Dave. She described the financial and romantic motives, highlighting Vivy's desperation to escape her marriage and be with Jason. Jacobs called several witnesses, including Detective Billy Pestion, who detailed the investigation and the evidence found. The defense attorney, Mickey Mouse Brown, a 50-year-old with a reputation for defending tough cases, argued that Vivy was coerced by Jason and Lana. He painted Vivy as a victim of manipulation, desperate and frightened. Brown tried to cast doubt on the prosecution's timeline and motives, suggesting that Jason and Lana were the real masterminds. The courtroom was tense as the trial unfolded. Dave's family sat in the front row, their faces a mix of sadness and anger. They listened intently as both sides presented their arguments. The jury was visibly affected by the emotional testimonies and the detailed evidence. After several days of deliberation, the jury found Vivy Markerson guilty of first-degree murder. The verdict was announced on February 20, 2008. Vivy showed little emotion as the verdict was read, but her pale face and trembling hands revealed her fear. The judge sentenced Vivy to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentence brought a sense of justice to Dave's family, though the pain of losing him remained. The impact of the trial and verdict rippled through the community. Dave's children, Jason and Lana, were deeply affected. Jason, already struggling with his drug addiction, found it hard to cope with the guilt and shame. Lana, despite her involvement, expressed remorse and cooperated with the authorities, which resulted in a lesser charge and a reduced sentence. The trial's conclusion marked the end of a tragic chapter for the Markerson family. The small town of Fishers, Indiana, was left to grapple with the shocking events and the dark secrets that had come to light. The case was widely covered in the media, with news outlets and local stations providing extensive coverage of the trial and its aftermath. In the end, justice was served, but the scars left behind would take a long time to heal. The Markerson family and the community of Fishers would forever remember the dark love triangle that led to Dave's tragic death. After the trial, life in Fishers, Indiana, slowly began to return to normal. However, for the Markerson family, the aftermath of the murder left deep scars. Dave Markerson's death and the trial of his wife, Vivy, had changed their lives forever. Jason Markerson, Dave's 25-year-old son, struggled the most. His drug addiction had worsened during the trial, and he had a hard time dealing with the guilt and shame of his involvement with Vivy. He checked into a rehabilitation center in Indianapolis, hoping to overcome his addiction and start anew. The path to recovery was long and challenging, but Jason was determined to turn his life around. Lana Markerson, Dave's 24-year-old daughter, faced her own set of challenges. Her role in the murder and the manipulation of Vivy had been exposed during the trial. Despite her cooperation with the authorities, she received a reduced sentence of 5 years in prison. Lana expressed deep remorse for her actions and planned to use her time in prison to reflect and rehabilitate. Vivy Markerson, now serving a like sentence, adapted to life behind bars. She spent her days reflecting on the choices that led to her imprisonment. Vivy joined a prison program that focused on education and personal growth. While she would never leave prison, she hoped to find some form of redemption. The town of Fishers, Indiana, slowly healed from the tragedy. The residents, who had been shocked by the events, came together to support one another. Community events and gatherings helped restore a sense of normalcy and unity. In the end, the tragic events surrounding Dave Markerson's death served as a stark reminder of the consequences of jealousy, betrayal, and desperation. The case had left a lasting impact on all those involved, but it also highlighted the importance of justice, redemption, and the strength of the human spirit. In the summer of 2001, as the world slowly adjusted to the new millennium, Ray Trusk, a 53-year-old life insurance analyst from Plano, Texas, was preparing to celebrate a milestone that many couples dream of but few reach: his 20th wedding anniversary. Ray, a father of 3, was known in his community as a man of integrity and dedication. He had built a stable career at New Life Financial, a reputable firm known for its competitive edge in the bustling Dallas-Fort Worth metroplex. A graduate of the University of Texas at Austin, Ray had climbed the ranks through sheer determination and a knack for numbers. His colleagues often described him as the first to arrive and the last to leave the office, a testament to his work ethic. Ray's life at home was no less exemplary. His wife, Dina, and their children were the center of his world. Neighbors would often see the Trusk family at community events or hear about their travels to places like the Grand Canyon or Disney World, the latter being featured in a 2001 Disney vacation planning VHS that had just been released. Ray's personality was a blend of the analytical mind of an insurance analyst and the warm heart of a family man. He was known for his dry wit, often referencing the latest Dilbert comic strip, which amusingly captured the quirks of corporate culture. His dreams, though, were not confined to spreadsheets and actuarial tables. Ray aspired to see his children graduate from college and to one day retire to a quiet life, perhaps in the Texas Hill Country, where he and Dinah could enjoy their golden years. In the days leading up to his death, Ray was seen in high spirits, even mentioning to his neighbor about his anticipation for the U2 Elevation Tour concert, scheduled for later that year. He had been meticulously planning the anniversary cruise, set to embark from Galveston, Texas, aboard the majestic Voyager of the Seas, a Royal Caribbean vessel famed for its luxurious amenities and scenic routes. Little did anyone know that this journey, meant to celebrate 2 decades of love and commitment, would be his last. On the morning of June 15, 2001, as the Voyager of the Seas, a Royal Caribbean cruise liner, cut through the tranquil waters of the Gulf of Mexico, an unsettling discovery was made that would mar the ship's record of idyllic voyages. It was approximately 7:30 a.m. when the body of Ray Truscott, a 53-year-old life insurance analyst from Plano, Texas, was spotted by a fishing boat, the Sea Sprite, captained by Marcus Caldwell. The vessel, a common sight in these waters, was out for its regular trawl when it stumbled upon the grim scene. The weather was uncharacteristically mild for a June morning, with a soft breeze that offered little solace to the crew of the Sea Sprite as they grappled with their find. Captain Caldwell, a seasoned mariner, was taken aback by the sight of the lifeless body bobbing in the gentle swells. His initial shock quickly turned to action as he radioed the Coast Guard, his voice steadied but tinged with the gravity of the situation. The crew, maintaining their composure, secured the area to preserve the integrity of what was now a crime scene. The discovery sent ripples through the media, with local news channels like KHU interrupting their regular programming to report on the incident. The cruise ship, which had set sail from Galveston, a port city still bustling with tourists flocking to attractions like Moody Gardens and the recently opened Schlitterbahn water park, was now the center of a tragic narrative. As the news of the discovery reached the ship, passengers who had been enjoying amenities such as the ship's ice skating rink and mini golf course were struck by a palpable sense of disbelief. The vacationers, many of whom were Texans looking to escape the early summer heat, were now witnesses to a real-life drama unfolding in the midst of their leisure. The serene morning of June 15, 2001, aboard the Voyager of the Seas was abruptly shattered when word of Ray Truscott's untimely death reached the ship's captain. Within hours, the vessel, a floating city that boasted a rock-climbing wall and an opulent dining hall, transformed into a somber crime scene. The U.S. Coast Guard, alongside the FBI, tasked with investigating crimes on international waters, quickly dispatched their best agents to the ship, which was now anchored off the coast of Galveston, Texas. Detective Corrine Henning and Detective George Givens were among the first to arrive. Henning, with a reputation for her unerring gut instinct, and Givens, known for his methodical approach to crime solving, stepped onto the ship with a sense of urgency. The media frenzy had already begun, with outlets broadcasting live updates, fueling public interest and speculation. The detectives made their way to stateroom 7156, the last known location of the victim. To their seasoned eyes, the interior of the room appeared undisturbed, the bed neatly made, and personal effects arranged as if awaiting their owner's return. However, the balcony presented a stark contrast. Chairs were overturned, and a single glass lay shattered, its fragments catching the morning light, a silent testament to the struggle that had occurred. The crime scene was meticulously processed. Forensic teams dusted for fingerprints, combed through fibers, and collected DNA samples, while the ship's CCTV footage was seized for review. The investigators' presence was a solemn reminder to the passengers that their idyllic retreat had been breached by violence. As the investigation unfolded, the world outside continued its pace. In the background, faint sounds could be heard from the ship's onboard entertainment system, a hit song of the time, now a jarring soundtrack to a tragedy. The detectives, unfazed by the ship's grandeur or the distractions of the media, focused on the grim task at hand, piecing together the final moments of Ray Truscott's life and identifying his killer. As the Voyager of the Seas remained anchored, a mere silhouette against the June sky, the investigation into Ray Truscott's death turned to those closest to him. Dina Truscott, 51, the victim's wife of 20 years, became the focus of intense scrutiny. Known for her gentle demeanor and her role as a devoted homemaker, Dina was the archetype of suburban tranquility in Plano, Texas, a city that prided itself on being one of the best places to live in America. According to a CNN Money magazine feature that year, Dina's life was seemingly filled with PDA meetings and Sunday family barbecues. Her dreams were modest, a happy family, a comfortable home, and the joy of seeing her children succeed. Yet, beneath the veneer of domestic bliss, detectives wondered if there lay a motive for murder. The interrogation was conducted away from the prying eyes of the public, who were busy discussing the case on internet forums, a burgeoning trend in the early 2000s. Detectives Henning and Givens, in a room with views of the endless ocean, questioned Dina. Her responses were punctuated by moments of confusion and long pauses. She struggled to account for her whereabouts at the time her husband was believed to have been thrown overboard. Her alibi, that she had been asleep in their stateroom, offered little in the way of corroboration. Despite her seemingly oblivious nature, Dina's reactions during the interrogation raised suspicion. Was her demeanor a mask for something more sinister, or simply the shock of a grieving widow? The detectives took note of her every word and gesture, aware that in cases such as these, the truth was often hidden in plain sight. As the investigation continued, the question remained, was Dina Truscott a heartbroken spouse or a cunning adversary? The inquiry into Ray Truscott's death intensified as the focus shifted to Bob Hackles, a 56-year-old colleague of the victim. Hackles, a seasoned insurance analyst at New Life Financial, was aboard the Voyager of the Seas with his family. His outward persona was that of an affable family man, yet beneath this facade was a clandestine relationship with Ray that, if exposed, could upend his life. Hackles' presence on the cruise was ostensibly for leisure, alongside his Russian wife, Irina, and their 2 children. However, investigators suspected that his true motive may have been rooted in the tangled web of his secret romantic involvement with the victim. The early 2000s were a time of contrasting attitudes towards such relationships, with television shows like Will and Grace bringing LGBTQ themes into mainstream media. Yet many still faced societal pressures to conform to traditional family structures. During the interrogation, Hackles maintained a calm exterior, answering questions with measured responses. Hackles was unflappable, even as detectives probed for a crack in his composure, seeking to understand the nature of his relationship with Ray and the potential for jealousy or betrayal to have driven him to murder. The police were methodical in their approach, aware that the success of shows like CSI, Crime Scene Investigation, which had captivated audiences with its portrayal of forensic science, had raised public expectations for swift and conclusive detective work. They scrutinized Hackles' alibi, cross-referencing it with witness statements and security footage, determined to uncover whether his calm was a facade for a more turbulent inner turmoil. As the investigation delved deeper, the question loomed, could Bob Hackles, the man who shared whispered confidences and stolen moments with Ray Truscott, be capable of ending the life of the man he loved? On June 17, 2001, 2 days after the discovery of Ray Truscott's body, a new piece of evidence surfaced aboard the Voyager of the Seas. The morning was marked by a gentle Gulf breeze as a crew member, performing routine maintenance along the starboard side of the ship, noticed something unusual. Caught on a piece of protruding metalwork was a fragment of fabric, navy blue, with a distinctive pattern that matched a shirt belonging to Bob Hackles, one of the prime suspects in the case. The finding was a potential turning point in the investigation, a tangible clue in a case that had thus far offered few. The fragment was immediately secured and sent for forensic analysis, with the hope that it might yield DNA or other materials that could link the suspect to the crime scene. The media, always hungry for a new angle on the story, began to speculate on the implications of this development. The FBI agents, well-versed in the nuances of evidence collection and its role in building a case, treated the discovery with the gravity it deserved. The weather, which had been a mix of sun and cloud, seemed to mirror the uncertainty that hung over the ship as passengers and crew alike pondered the significance of the find. As the news of the fabric fragment reached the mainland, it became a topic of discussion on news programs, where anchors dissected the latest developments with legal experts. The cruise ship, once a symbol of escape and relaxation, had become the backdrop for a narrative that was as gripping as any summer blockbuster, with the added weight of real-world consequence. The investigators, for their part, continued their meticulous work, aware that in the world of criminal justice, unlike the instant gratification of winning a game of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, patience and thoroughness were the keys to uncovering the truth. The investigation's next chapter unfolded as attention turned to Carl Bauhines, a 49-year-old librarian from Largo, Florida, whose connection to Ray Truscott added another layer of complexity to the case. Carl, a seemingly unassuming man, was revealed to have been entwined in a secret romantic liaison with Ray, a fact unknown to both Dina Truscott and Bob Hackles, the other suspects in this unfolding drama. On board the Voyager of the Seas, Carl's demeanor stood in contrast to the ship's vibrant atmosphere, which typically buzzed with the excitement of vacationing families and couples. His quiet, introspective nature belied the depth of his involvement with Ray, and as the FBI delved into his background, they uncovered a man who dreamed of a life less ordinary. Yearning for acceptance in a world that was just beginning to embrace diversity in love and relationships. In the interview room, Carl's emotions were palpable. He vacillated between anger and profound sadness, his dreams of a future with Ray now irreparably shattered. For Carl, there was no escape from the harsh glare of suspicion that now shone upon him. His responses to the FBI's probing questions were tinged with desperation as he struggled to reconcile his clandestine relationship with the brutal end it had met. As the investigation wore on, the public followed the case with the same fervor as they did the unfolding saga of Gary Condit and Chandra Levy, a scandal that dominated the news cycles. The question on everyone's mind was whether Carl Bauhines, a man who sought solace in the quiet corridors of a library, could be capable of a crime as loud as murder. The investigation aboard the Voyager of the Seas culminated in a revelation that pierced the veil of mystery surrounding Ray Truscott's death. Bob Hackles, a 56-year-old insurance analyst and secret romantic partner of the victim, emerged as the perpetrator. The evidence painstakingly gathered by the FBI pointed irrefutably to a crime of passion, a fatal encounter that transpired against the backdrop of the ship's grandeur in the Gulf of Mexico's expanse. Bob, known for his convivial demeanor and professional success, was a man whose outward life belied the turmoil within. His dreams of a concealed relationship with Ray, free from the scrutiny of society and the constraints of his own family, had been dashed by Ray's intention to leave him for Carl Bauhines. The revelation had ignited a rage in Bob that culminated in a violent confrontation, ending with Ray's body being cast into the ocean's depths. The method was as brutal as it was definitive. Bob had pushed Ray from the balcony of their stateroom after a heated argument. The motive was clear, a mixture of jealousy, fear, and the unbearable prospect of losing Ray to another. The crime, devoid of weapons or premeditation, was an impulsive act that forever altered the course of several lives. As the news of the murderer's identity spread, the story became a subject of intense media scrutiny. Outlets like the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal typically focused on the economic downturn and the recently introduced tax cuts by President George W. Bush, now found space on their front pages for the sordid details of the case. Bob Hackles, once a respected member of his professional community, now faced the stark reality of his actions. His life, once interwoven with the fabric of Ray's, had unraveled in a moment of uncontrolled fury. The question of why a man would commit such an act hung heavily in the air, a reminder of the fragile nature of the human psyche. The climactic turn in the investigation aboard the Voyager of the Seas came on the morning of June 20, 2001. The skies above Galveston, Texas, were overcast, a somber reflection of the proceedings on the ship below. Bob Hackles, a 56-year-old insurance analyst and the man now known to have ended Ray Truscott's life, was taken into custody. The arrest, executed with precision by the FBI, was the culmination of days of meticulous investigation and evidence gathering. Hackles, who had maintained a veneer of composure throughout the interrogation process, met his fate with a quiet resignation. There was no dramatic outburst or plea for innocence. Instead, he seemed to have accepted the reality of his situation, perhaps aware that the weight of the evidence against him left little room for denial. The news of the arrest spread rapidly, with networks breaking into their regular programming to report the latest development. As Hackles was escorted off the ship in handcuffs, the passengers, who had been enjoying amenities like the ship's casino and Broadway-style shows, were now silent witnesses to the stark reality of justice being served. The atmosphere was charged with a mix of relief and morbid curiosity. Dina Truscott and her children, who had boarded the cruise to celebrate a milestone anniversary, were left to grapple with a complex mix of emotions. The revelation of Ray's secret life and the identity of his killer had torn through their family, leaving them to face a future marred by tragedy and public scrutiny. The trial of Bob Hackles, set against the backdrop of a post-Y2K America grappling with the tremors of a shifting global landscape, commenced with the gravity befitting a case that had captured the nation's attention. The courtroom, often a stage for the dramas of human conflict, was packed with journalists, each racing to feed the public's appetite for updates, much like the frenzy surrounding the release of Apple's iPod later that year. A device that promised to revolutionize the way we consumed media. Prosecutor Angelo Argelia, A seasoned attorney with a reputation for his relentless pursuit of justice, presented a narrative of betrayal and jealousy that had culminated in the tragic death of Ray Truscott. He painted Hackles as a man whose facade of normalcy was shattered by the revelation of his secret relationship and the prospect of its end. The defense, led by the astute Janet Pringles, countered with an appeal to the jury's sense of compassion, framing Hackles' actions as those of a man driven to the brink by emotional turmoil, not unlike the characters in the popular primetime drama The Sopranos, which delved into the complexities of the human psyche. As the trial unfolded, the victims' families sat in the gallery, their presence a silent testament to their loss. The emotional toll on Dina Truscott and her children was palpable, their grief compounded by the media circus that had descended upon their private tragedy. The verdict, when it came, was unanimous. Guilty. The sentencing followed, with Hackles receiving a punishment that some deemed harsh, others lenient, but all recognized as the irreversible conclusion to a series of irrevocable choices. The courtroom, which had been a crucible of tension, released a collective breath as justice was pronounced. The aftermath of the verdict rippled through the Truscott family and friends, their reactions a mosaic of relief, vindication, and unending sorrow. The case, which had unfolded alongside the country's preoccupation with events like the brewing storm over the Enron scandal, left an indelible mark on all who had been touched by it. In the wake of the trial that concluded with Bob Hackles' conviction, the individuals connected to the tragedy aboard the Voyager of the Seas began the arduous process of moving forward. The Truscott family, their private grief made public, sought solace in the routines of daily life. Dina Truscott, once planning for an anniversary celebration, now faced the daunting task of rebuilding her family's world without Ray. The children grappled with the dual loss of their father and the family's untarnished image. Detective Corinne Henning and Detective George Gibbons, the law enforcement duo who had pieced together the case, continued their careers with the FBI, each carrying the weight of the Truscott case as a somber reminder of the complexities hidden within human relationships. The case had tested their resolve and proven their dedication to uncovering the truth. Carl Bauhein's return to his life in Largo, Florida, his brief and secret romance with Ray now a closed chapter, its details buried in court documents and news archives. He sought anonymity, a return to the quietude of his profession, away from the sensationalism that had briefly thrust him into the public eye. The world outside, meanwhile, carried on at its relentless pace. The stock market, which had been in a state of flux since the dot-com bubble burst, continued to ebb and flow, a reflection of the nation's economic uncertainties. Brands like Nokia and Motorola dominated the mobile phone market, their devices a ubiquitous presence in the hands of those eager to stay connected in an increasingly digital age. As the years passed, the memory of the case faded from the public consciousness, replaced by new headlines and scandals. Yet for those directly affected by the tragedy, the echoes of the past remained. They moved through their lives, each day a step further from the events on the ship, but forever aware of the indelible mark left by the case of Ray Truscott. As we close this chapter of True Crime Case Files, we're reminded of the unpredictable nature of the human heart. A voyage that began with celebration ended in tragedy, leaving us to ponder the line between love and obsession. Lynette Werner was a 34-year-old woman who lived in Salt Lake City, Utah. She worked as an elementary school teacher at Rose Park Elementary School. Known for her kindness, patience, and dedication, Lynette loved her students and always tried to help them learn and grow. She had a gentle soul and was deeply loved by her community. Lynette was also an avid reader. She enjoyed spending her evenings with a good book, often picking up the latest bestsellers from local bookstores like the King's English Bookshop. Her favorite genre was historical romance, and she the books of author Joyce Lehman, who was popular among female readers at the time. Lynette also loved gardening. She spent many weekends in her backyard, planting flowers and vegetables. She found peace in watching her garden grow and bloom. Lynette was married to Mike Werner, a charming man who seemed like the perfect husband. They had a cozy home in a quiet neighborhood. Lynette was close to her family, especially her younger sister Julie, who lived nearby. Julie often visited Lynette to help with the garden or just to chat over a cup of coffee. Lynette's parents, who lived in Idaho, would call her regularly to catch up and hear about her life. In May 2005, Lynette was excited about the upcoming summer break. She was planning a new project for her students that involved reading and gardening. She believed it would help them learn about both literature and nature. She was also looking forward to spending more time in her garden, which was beginning to bloom with roses and tulips. Lynette's colleagues at Rose Park Elementary admired her dedication. She was always the first to arrive and the last to leave, making sure everything was perfect for her students. Her principal often praised her for her hard work and commitment. Lynette's dreams were simple but profound. She wanted to inspire her students, create a loving home, and make a difference in her community. Her life seemed perfect, and she was happy and fulfilled. But in the days leading up to her death, everything changed. The peaceful life Lynette had built was shattered by a tragic event that no one saw coming. On the morning of May 12, 2005, the weather was clear and sunny in Salt Lake City, Utah. At around 7:30 a.m., Mike Werner called 911, his voice filled with panic. He told the dispatcher that he had found his wife, Lynette Werner, unresponsive in their bathtub. Earlier that morning, Mike had woken up and noticed that Lynette was not in bed. Thinking she might be in the bathroom, he knocked on the door but got no response. When he opened the door, he found Lynette lying in the bathtub, the water still. She wasn't moving. Mike tried to wake her but quickly realized something was very wrong. The 911 call was short and frantic. Mike sounded scared and desperate as he explained what had happened. Within minutes, an ambulance arrived at their home, followed closely by the police. Paramedics tried to revive Lynette, but soon pronounced her dead at the scene. Neighbors began to gather outside the Werner home, whispering among themselves. Some of them had seen Lynette the day before, smiling and waving as she tended to her garden. The news of her death spread quickly through the neighborhood, leaving everyone in disbelief. The local news stations, including KUTV and Fox 13, soon picked up the story. Reporters arrived at the scene, setting up cameras and interviewing neighbors who described Lynette as a lovely and kind person. The media coverage added to the tension and sadness that hung over the neighborhood. As the day went on, Lynette's family was notified. Her sister, Julie, arrived in tears, unable to comprehend what had happened. The tragic news left everyone who knew Lynette in shock, struggling to understand how such a vibrant and caring person could be gone so suddenly. On May 12, 2005, after paramedics pronounced Lynette Werner dead, Detective Sara Adelaide and Officer James Elizette began their investigation. They arrived quickly, within 10 minutes of the 911 call. The first thing they noticed was how calm and tidy the bathroom appeared. There were no signs of struggle, and everything seemed in place. Lynette was found in the bathtub, the water still and clear. She was fully clothed, wearing her usual evening attire. The room was brightly lit by the morning sun streaming through the window. The scene suggested an accidental drowning, but Detective Adelaide wanted to be thorough. She knew that sometimes appearances could be deceiving. Mike Werner, Lynette's husband, was sitting on the living room couch, looking pale and shaken. He seemed in shock and kept repeating, "How could this happen?" Detective Adelaide and Officer Elizette approached him gently, asking him to describe what had happened. Mike repeated his story. Lynette had taken a bath the night before, and he had gone to bed early. When he woke up, he found her in the tub, unresponsive. Detective Adelaide noticed that Mike's story was consistent, but she still had questions. She asked him about Lynette's health and whether she had any medical conditions that could explain what happened. Mike shook his head, saying Lynette was healthy and had no known issues. He seemed genuinely confused and distressed. The police then turned their attention to the rest of the house. They looked for anything unusual or out of place. They checked the bedroom, kitchen, and living room, but everything seemed normal. There were no signs of forced entry or anything that would suggest foul play. Forensics teams arrived and began their work. They took samples of the water from the bathtub, checked for fingerprints, and collected any potential evidence. They used luminol to check for any hidden traces of blood, but nothing was found. The team also took Lynette's body for an autopsy to determine the exact cause of death. By the end of the day, the initial investigation suggested that Lynette's death was an accident. There were no obvious signs of foul play. However, Detective Adelaide remained cautious. She knew that sometimes the truth took time to uncover. She decided to keep a close eye on the autopsy results and any other evidence that might come up. The police wrapped up their work at the scene, leaving the Werner home quiet and still, a stark contrast to the chaos and confusion of the morning. Lynette's death left a deep sadness in the neighborhood, as everyone waited for more answers. In the weeks following Lynette Werner's death, the police continued their investigation. Despite the initial conclusion of accidental drowning, Detective Sara Adelaide wanted to be sure they hadn't missed anything. During their review, a possible suspect emerged, Richie Ali, a 65-year-old felon. and registered sex offender who had been seen walking near Lynette's home on the day she died. Richie Ali was known in the neighborhood. He had a long criminal history and was known for his erratic behavior. Some neighbors reported seeing him loitering around Lynette's street several times. His presence made people uneasy, and the police decided to question him. Detective Adelaide and Officer Elizette brought Richie in for interrogation at the Salt Lake City Police Department. Richie was disheveled and nervous when he arrived. He claimed he was just passing through the neighborhood on the day Lynette died. When asked about his whereabouts, Richie provided an alibi, saying he spent most of the day at a local diner, Ikop, which was popular with locals for its affordable meals and classic American diner feel. The detectives checked Richie's alibi. They spoke to the staff at Ikop, who remembered seeing Richie there for breakfast and lunch. He had been chatting with the regulars and reading the Salt Lake Tribune. The timeline seemed to match up, but the police needed to be thorough. They checked surveillance footage from nearby stores and found Richie on camera during the times he claimed to be at the diner. During the interrogation, Richie was defensive and agitated. He denied any involvement in Lynette's death and insisted he had nothing to do with it. Detective Adelaide observed his body language and noted that while he was nervous, he didn't show signs of lying. The questioning was tense, but eventually Richie's alibi was confirmed, and the police had to let him go. Richie's behavior raised some suspicions, but with a solid alibi and no evidence linking him to the crime scene, the police had no choice but to clear him as a suspect. Detective Adelaide was disappointed but knew she had to follow the evidence. She continued to look into other leads, determined to find out what really happened to Lynette. As the investigation progressed, the community remained on edge. The news of Richie's questioning spread quickly, adding to the local gossip. Neighbors did not believe that he wasn't involved, but they also wanted answers. Lynette's death remained a mystery, and the police were still searching for the truth. 4 years after Lynette Werner's tragic death, another mystery unfolded. In January 2009, Sarah Zadii, a 28-year-old nurse, was found dead at the bottom of the staircase in her home. Sarah was known for her compassion and dedication as a nurse at the University of Utah Hospital. She was also an avid hiker and volunteered at local shelters. On January 19, 2009, a neighbor, Pamela Lamley, found Sarah's body. Pamela had stopped by to check on Sarah after not hearing from her for a few days. When she saw Sarah at the bottom of the stairs, she immediately called 911, her voice shaking with fear. The police and paramedics arrived quickly, finding Sarah dead from what appeared to be a fall. Detective Sarah Adelaide and Officer James Elizette were once again on the case. They arrived at the scene and began their investigation. The staircase was wooden, with no railings. The house was neat and clean, with no signs of a struggle. It seemed like a tragic accident, but Detective Adelaide had a feeling something was off. Sarah's husband, Mike Werner, was questioned again. He seemed deeply grieved and distraught, much like he had been after Lynette's death. Mike said he had been at work when the accident happened. He worked as an insurance agent at State Farm, the insurance provider who's always there for you, and his colleagues confirmed his alibi. Mike's demeanor was calm and cooperative during the interrogation. He expressed his shock and sadness, insisting he couldn't understand how such a thing could happen. Detective Adelaide found his reactions consistent with someone who had just lost a loved one, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. Sarah's friends and family were devastated by her sudden death. They described her as a resilient and empathetic person who was always there for others. The idea that she could have simply fallen down the stairs seemed hard to believe. Her best friend, Jana, mentioned that Sarah was always careful, especially in her own home. As the police investigated further, they found that Mike had taken out a substantial life insurance policy on Sarah just a few months before her death. This raised suspicions, but there was no concrete evidence linking him to the fall. The autopsy showed that Sarah had died from head trauma consistent with a fall, and there were no signs of foul play. Despite the suspicious circumstances, the lack of physical evidence made it difficult to pursue charges. The police were left with unanswered questions and a sense of unease. Mike Werner remained free, but the investigation into his wife's deaths continued. Detective Adelaide knew she had to stay vigilant. The pattern of accidents was troubling, and she was determined to uncover the truth. The community, still haunted by the mysterious deaths, hoped for answers as the investigation pressed on. Janet Werner, the third wife of Mike Werner, died on June 3, 2013. She was 49 years old and worked as an accountant. Janet was known for her meticulous nature and great sense of humor. She loved solving puzzles and was very close to her family and friends. People described her as loyal and trustworthy. On the evening of June 3rd, Janet was found dead in her garage from what appeared to be carbon monoxide poisoning caused by a faulty heater. Mike, yet again, was the one who found her and called 911 sounding distraught. The initial investigation ruled her death an accident, just like the previous cases involving Mike's wives. Detective Sarah Adelaide decided to look deeper into Janet's death after receiving new evidence linking Mike to suspicious life insurance policies. Janet had taken out a large life insurance policy just months before her death, with Mike as the sole beneficiary. This pattern was too significant to ignore. Detective Adelaide and Officer James Elizette went to Janet's home to re-examine the scene. The garage was tidy, and the heater appeared to be the source of the carbon monoxide. But upon closer inspection, the forensics team found signs of tampering with the heater, suggesting it was no accident. This discovery raised serious questions about Mike's involvement. The police questioned Mike again, this time with more intensity. Mike was now 45 years old, handsome as always and charming, always portraying himself as a grieving widower. However, under pressure, his calm demeanor began to crack. He insisted that Janet's death was a tragic accident and denied any wrongdoing. Janet's friends and family were interviewed as well. They described Janet as a happy and healthy woman who was always cautious. Her sudden death was a shock to everyone. Her sister, Karen, recalled that Janet had mentioned feeling uneasy about the new heater, but didn't think much of it at the time. The police also discovered that Mike had a history of financial troubles. Despite his successful appearance, he had accumulated significant debt. The life insurance payouts from his wives' deaths seemed to be a way for him to solve his financial problems. This provided a strong motive for the police to consider. The investigation revealed more disturbing details about Mike's past. Before Lynette's, Sarah, and Janet, Mike had been married to a woman named Jennifer, who also died under mysterious circumstances. This pattern of deaths and life insurance claims made it clear that Mike was not just a grieving husband, but possibly a serial killer. With this new information, Detective Adelaide felt they were getting closer to the truth. The evidence against Mike was mounting, and it was only a matter of time before they could prove his involvement in the deaths of his wives. The investigation was now focused on uncovering every detail to bring justice for Lynette's, Sarah, Janet, and Jennifer. Janet's tragic death, once thought to be an accident, was now seen as part of a sinister pattern. The police were determined to uncover the full extent of Mike Werner's actions and hold him accountable. On June 20, 2013, the sunny weather in Salt Lake City set the stage for a major breakthrough in the case. Detective Sarah Adelaide and her team had gathered enough evidence to arrest Mike Werner for the murders of his wives. Mike, 45, was a charming and successful insurance agent. He seemed like the perfect husband, but his calm exterior hid a dark history of manipulation and greed. The investigation revealed that Mike had married and killed 4 women: Jennifer, Lynette, Sarah, and Janet. Each time he collected large life insurance payouts, which he used to cover his financial troubles. Mike was also found to be a member of a disturbing website called wifekillcompetition.net, where members competed to see how many wives they could kill without getting caught. Apparently, Mike, with only 4 dead wives, wasn't even a top scorer. A Japanese man on the site managed to marry and kill 23 women without getting caught. Detective Adelaide and Officer James Elizette planned Mike's arrest carefully. They wanted to ensure they had everything they needed to bring him to justice. At 9:00 a.m., they arrived at Mike's office where he was meeting with a client. The police entered the building calmly and approached Mike, who was taken by surprise. He looked shocked as Detective Adelaide read him his rights, then placed him in handcuffs. Mike's reaction was one of disbelief. He protested his innocence, claiming he loved his wives and would never harm them. However, the evidence was overwhelming. The police had proof of his involvement in all 4 deaths, including the tampered heater that killed Janet and the life insurance policies he took out on each wife shortly before their deaths. The news of Mike's arrest spread quickly. Local news stations, including KUTV and Fox 13, covered the story extensively. Reporters gathered outside the police station, and neighbors expressed their shock and relief that Mike had been arrested. The families of Lynette, Sarah, Janet, and Jennifer were notified. Lynette's sister, Julie, was relieved but also devastated by the confirmation of Mike's guilt. Sarah's best friend, Emily, expressed similar feelings, saying, "Justice is finally being served, but it doesn't bring Sarah back." Detective Adelaide felt a sense of accomplishment. She had worked tirelessly on the case, and now the man responsible for these tragic deaths was behind bars. The community, still reeling from the revelations, began to feel a sense of closure. Mike Werner's arrest marked the end of a long and complex investigation. The police had uncovered the truth, and justice was finally being served. The families of the victims could now begin to heal, knowing that the man who caused so much pain would face the consequences of his actions. In early 2014, Mike Werner's trial began. The courtroom was packed with reporters, family members, and curious onlookers. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Karen Anasilia, a 45-year-old known for her sharp mind and dedication to justice. She presented a compelling case against Mike, detailing how he had systematically killed his wives for life insurance money. Anasilia started by outlining the pattern of deaths. Jennifer in 2002, Lynette in 2005, Sarah in 2009, and Janet in 2013. Each wife had a large life insurance policy, and each death was initially ruled an accident. Anasilia showed evidence of Mike's financial troubles and his membership in the wifekillcompetition.net website. She argued that Mike was a cold-blooded killer who saw his wives as means to an end. The defense attorney, Robert Burke, was a 50-year-old with a reputation for defending high-profile clients. Burke argued that Mike loved his wives and that their deaths were tragic accidents. He claimed the insurance policies were standard precautions and that Mike had no motive to harm his loved ones. Burke also tried to discredit the prosecution's evidence, suggesting that the tampering with the heater could have been a coincidence. Throughout the trial, emotions ran high. Lynette's sister, Julie, often broke down in tears, while Sarah's best friend, Emily, glared at Mike from the gallery. The families of the victims wanted justice and closure for their lost loved ones. After weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for 3 days. On February 10, 2014, they returned with a verdict. Mike Werner was found guilty of first-degree murder for the deaths of Jennifer, Lynette, Sarah, and Janet. The courtroom erupted in gasps and whispers as the verdict was read. Mike was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She called his actions calculated and heinous, and expressed her hope that the sentence would bring some peace to the victims' families. Mike showed little emotion as the sentence was handed down. His once charming demeanor was replaced by a blank stare. The families of the victims had mixed reactions. Lynette's sister, Julie, said, "I'm relieved he's finally being held accountable, but nothing can bring my sister back." Sarah's friend, Emily, added, "This is justice, but it's also a reminder of the pain he caused." The trial and sentencing had a profound impact on the community. Many were shocked that such evil could exist behind a facade of normalcy. The case also brought attention to the importance of thorough investigations and the potential dangers of life insurance policies. In the aftermath, the victims' families began to heal, knowing that Mike Werner would never harm anyone again. The police officers and detectives involved felt a sense of closure, having brought a dangerous man to justice. The community, while still grappling with the horror of the crimes, took solace in the fact that justice had been served. Following Mike Werner's trial and conviction, life began to slowly return to normal for the families involved, the police, and the community. However, the scars left by the tragic events lingered, reshaping the lives of those touched by the case. For Lynette Werner's family, the trial offered closure, but the pain of her loss remained. Julie, her sister, found solace in connecting with support groups and advocating for victims of domestic violence. She also spearheaded a campaign to raise awareness about the dangers of online forums like wifekillcompetition.net. Sarah Zadi's friends and colleagues at the University of Utah Hospital honored her memory by establishing a scholarship fund in her name. They organized charity events and fundraisers to support causes Sarah was passionate about, such as animal welfare and healthcare access for underserved communities. Janet Werner's family struggled to come to terms with the betrayal by someone they once considered family. They leaned on each other for support, finding strength in their shared memories of Janet's kindness and humor. Together, they planted a garden in her memory, cultivating her favorite flowers and vegetables. As for the community, the case served as a sobering reminder of the dangers that could lurk behind closed doors. It prompted discussions about the importance of vigilance and support for victims of domestic violence. Organizations like the Salt Lake City Domestic Violence Coalition saw an increase in calls for assistance and redoubled their efforts to provide resources and support to those in need. In the aftermath of the trial, Salt Lake City came together to heal and rebuild. While the wounds left by the tragedy would never fully heal, the community found strength in solidarity and a renewed commitment to supporting one another in times of need. Jesse Harper was a 29-year-old woman living in Athens, Georgia. She worked as a barista at Starbucks, where she was known for her friendly smile and artistic coffee creations. Jessie had a vibrant personality and loved to bring joy to those around her. She often worked on art projects in her free time, dreaming of opening her own gallery someday. Jessie lived in a small apartment close to downtown Athens, where she enjoyed the lively atmosphere and community events. Jessie had a close-knit group of friends and was well-liked by her coworkers. She was sociable, often organizing get-togethers and participating in local art shows. Her friends described her as creative and free-spirited, someone who could light up any room. Jessie was also involved in various local activities, such as volunteering at the animal shelter and attending music festivals. Born and raised in Athens, Jessie attended Clark Central High School and later took some art classes at the University of Georgia. Her family included her elderly husband, Dan Harper, a retired photography professor, and her younger brother, Mark Harper, who lived in Boston. Jessie's relationship with Dan was complicated by their 63-year age difference and Dan's health problems. Despite these challenges, Jessie remained dedicated to her marriage. In the days before her death, Jessie was busy with her usual activities. She had just finished a large mural at a local cafe and was excited about its positive reception. She was also preparing for an art exhibition at a nearby gallery, where she planned to showcase her latest pieces. Jessie spent her days working at Starbucks, catching up with friends, and creating art. She often talked about her future plans and dreams, showing her optimistic outlook on life. However, Jessie's personal life was not without its difficulties. She was involved in a love triangle with her husband, Dan, and her close friend and coworker, Jess Owens. This complicated relationship added stress to Jessie's life, though she tried to keep a positive attitude. On the morning of August 15, 2010, Jesse Harper's life would come to a tragic end. Her vibrant personality and creative spirit were well known in Athens, and her death shocked the community. Jessie was a beloved figure whose dreams and kindness left a lasting impact on those who knew her. On the morning of August 15, 2010, Athens, Georgia was enjoying a clear, sunny day with temperatures in the mid-70s. The town was quiet, with many people still recovering from the excitement of the recent Twilight Criterium, a popular annual bike race. At 8:30 a.m., Patty Johnson, Jessie's next-door neighbor, began to worry. She hadn't seen Jessie in a few days, which was unusual since they often chatted in the hallway. Patty, a 45-year-old schoolteacher, decided to check on Jessie. She knocked on the door, but got no answer. Knowing Jessie often left a spare key with her, Patty decided to use it. As she opened the door, a sense of dread filled her. The apartment was eerily quiet, with the only sound being the hum of the air conditioner. Patty called out Jessie's name, but got no response. As Patty walked into the living room, she made a horrifying discovery. Jessie was lying on the floor, motionless. A silk scarf was tightly wrapped around her neck, and her face was pale. Shocked and terrified, Patty immediately backed out of the apartment and dialed 911, her hands shaking. Within minutes, emergency services arrived at the scene. Paramedics quickly confirmed that Jessie was dead. The police arrived shortly after. Patty was visibly shaken as she spoke with them. She described Jessie as a cheerful and friendly neighbor who had never shown any signs of trouble. Patty's account was filled with sadness and disbelief. She could not understand who would want to hurt Jessie. The news of Jessie's death quickly spread through the community. The local newspaper, the Athens Banner-Herald, reported on the tragic incident, and residents were stunned. Jessie's co-workers at Starbucks were particularly devastated, as they had considered her a close friend. The discovery of Jessie's body marked the beginning of a complex investigation that would soon reveal the dark secrets of those closest to her. On the morning of August 15, 2010, the Athens Police Department swiftly responded to the 911 call about Jesse Harper's death. Detective Michael Reynolds and Officer Sarah Thompson led the investigation. Detective Reynolds, known for his calm demeanor and methodical approach, was a veteran in the department. Officer Thompson, respected for her keen attention to detail, was relatively new but already showed promise. Upon arriving at Jessie's apartment, the police immediately secured the area. The living room where Jessie's body was found was unsettling. The sight of the young woman with a silk scarf tightly wrapped around her neck was a chilling image.
The room itself was mostly tidy, but there were signs of a struggle: an overturned coffee table and a few scattered cushions. The apartment showed no signs of forced entry, suggesting Jessie knew of her attacker. Detective Reynolds began examining the scene, carefully noting every detail. Officer Thompson started taking photographs and collecting evidence. They found fingerprints on the silk scarf and various surfaces in the apartment. But police also took samples for DNA testing. The crime scene investigators dusted for prints, collected fibers, and looked for any other potential clues that could point to the murderer. The Athens police used the latest forensic tools available in 2010. They brought in a luminol spray to check for any hidden bloodstains and used an alternate light source to find fibers or hairs that might not be visible to the naked eye. They also checked Jesse's phone and computer for any recent communications that could provide clues. As the investigation unfolded, Detective Reynolds and Officer Thompson interviewed neighbors and friends. Karen Johnson, who had found Jesse, described the victim as a friendly and cheerful neighbor. She mentioned Jesse's complicated personal life, including her relationships with her husband, Dan Harper, and her friend, Jess Owens. The investigators also spoke with Jesse's coworkers at Starbucks. They described Jesse as a kind and creative person, but hinted at some recent tension between her and Jess Owens. This information helped the police narrow down their list of suspects. Throughout the day, the police worked diligently to gather all possible evidence from the crime scene. The discovery of Jesse Harper's body had shaken the community, and the police were determined to find her killer. Detective Reynolds and Officer Thompson knew that solving this case would require piecing together the puzzle of Jesse's life and relationships. Dan Harper, the first suspect, was 92 years old and Jesse's husband. A retired photography professor at the University of Georgia, Dan was famous for his work during the Korean War for Life magazine. He met Jesse when she was 19, and they quickly started dating, despite the 63-year age difference. Dan was known for his adventurous spirit and charm, but his intense nature sometimes led to possessiveness. His frequent hospital visits for health issues created tension in their marriage, adding to the complications of their relationship. The police brought Dan in for questioning at the Athens Police Department. Detective Michael Reynolds led the interrogation, wanting to understand Dan's perspective and his possible involvement in Jesse's death. Dan appeared heartbroken and tired as he sat down with the detectives. His eyes were filled with sadness, and he spoke softly but firmly, denying any involvement in the crime. Dan described his relationship with Jesse as loving but strained due to his health problems. He admitted to feeling jealous at times, especially when Jesse spent time with her friends or worked late at Starbucks. However, he insisted that he would never harm her. He told the detectives about his last interaction with Jesse, which had been a simple conversation about her upcoming art show. Dan's alibi for the night of the murder was his hospital stay, where he was being treated for a chronic illness. The detectives checked Dan's alibi and found it solid. Hospital records confirmed he was admitted the night Jesse was killed. Despite this, they continued to probe for more information, hoping to uncover any details that could help them understand Jesse's life and potential threats. During the interrogation, Dan remained calm but visibly distraught. He answered the questions patiently, often pausing to collect his thoughts. He expressed deep sorrow over Jesse's death and a strong desire to see her killer brought to justice. Dan's love for Jesse was evident, and its heartbreak seemed genuine. As the investigation continued, the police turned their attention to other suspects, but Dan Harper remained a person of interest due to his close relationship with the victim and the complexities within their marriage. They hoped further investigation would reveal more about who could have wanted Jesse dead. The second suspect in Jesse Harper's murder was Jess Owens, a 27-year-old co-worker and close friend of Jesse. Jess Owens worked with Jesse at Starbucks, where their friendship blossomed into a secret sexual relationship. Jess was known for her warm and friendly personality, but she also struggled with feelings of insecurity, especially about Jesse's relationship with her husband, Dan Harper. On August 16, 2010, the police brought Jess Owens in for questioning at the Athens Police Department. Detective Michael Reynolds and Officer Sarah Thompson led the interrogation. Jess appeared nervous as she entered the room, her eyes red from crying. She sat down and took a deep breath before the questioning began. Jess described her relationship with Jesse as more than just friendship. She admitted they had been involved in a sexual relationship for several months. She spoke about how much she loved Jesse and how their bond had grown stronger over time. Jess explained that while she knew about Jesse's marriage to Dan, she believed Jesse would eventually leave him for her. When asked about the night of the murder, Jess said she had been at home, feeling unwell. She stated that she had not seen Jesse since their shift together at Starbucks the day before.
However, her alibi was weak, as no one could confirm her whereabouts during the crucial hours. Detective Reynolds and Officer Thompson pressed further, asking Jess about any recent arguments or conflicts with Jesse. Jess admitted they had argued a few days before the murder. She confessed that she was jealous and frustrated about Jesse's relationship with Dan, but she insisted she would never harm Jesse. Jess was visibly emotional, her voice trembling as she spoke about how much she missed Jesse. The police searched Jess's apartment and belongings for any evidence linking her to the crime. They found a few items that raised suspicion, including a silk scarf similar to the one used to strangle Jesse. This discovery made Jess a prime suspect, despite her emotional pleas of innocence. Jess's reaction to the interrogation was a mix of sorrow and anxiety. She was cooperative but clearly distressed, repeatedly expressing her love for Jesse and her disbelief that she was a suspect. The police noted her emotional volatility and the contradictions in her statements, which added to their suspicion. As the investigation progressed, the detectives kept Jess Owens under close scrutiny. They knew her complicated relationship with Jesse and her emotional instability could be key to solving the case. Jess remained a central figure in their search for the truth behind Jesse Harper's tragic death. On August 20, 2010, 5 days after Jesse Harper's murder, the weather in Athens, Georgia, was hot and humid. The police were still hard at work trying to solve the case. That morning, a breakthrough came when a maintenance worker found a small piece of paper in the hallway near Jesse's apartment. The paper appeared to be a torn note with handwriting on it. He quickly handed the note over to Detective Michael Reynolds and Officer Sarah Thompson, who were still investigating the case. The note read, "Meet me at 8. We need to talk. J." The detectives believed the note was written by Jess Owens. The handwriting was similar to Jess's, and the detectives knew that J was how Jess signed her notes to Jesse. This new piece of evidence shifted the focus back to Jess Owens. The note suggested that she had planned to meet Jesse on the night of the murder. Detective Reynolds and Officer Thompson re-interviewed Jess Owens, presenting her with the note. Jess looked shocked and admitted that she had written the note, but insisted she had not met Jesse that night. Jess's reaction was a mix of fear and confusion. She repeated her earlier statements about being at home and feeling unwell. Despite her claims, the detectives felt they were getting closer to the truth. They decided to take a closer look at Jess's phone records and text messages. They found several messages between Jess and Jesse, showing a pattern of arguments and reconciliation. The last message from Jess to Jesse read, "I'll be there at 8. We need to sort this bleep out." The detectives also revisited the evidence collected from Jess's apartment. They re-examined the silk scarf they had found, comparing it to the one used to strangle Jesse. Forensic tests showed that both scarves were from the same set, a limited edition sold at a local boutique where both women had shopped. With this new evidence, the detectives were more convinced than ever that Jess Owens was hiding something. They continued to press her, hoping to uncover the full truth about what had happened on the night of August 15. The discovery of the torn note was a significant step forward in the investigation, bringing the police closer to solving the mystery of Jesse Harper's tragic death. The third suspect in Jesse Harper's murder was Maximo Lara Rodriguez, a 35-year-old local gang leader. Known for his violent past and current involvement in criminal activities, Maximo had a reputation for being both ambitious and controlling. He had a tumultuous relationship with Jess before they broke up, but he never fully moved on and continued to harbor strong feelings for her. On August 21, 2010, the Athens Police Department decided to bring Maximo in for questioning. The weather that day was sweltering, with temperatures soaring into the high 80s. Detective Michael Reynolds and Officer Sarah Thompson knew that interviewing Maximo would be challenging given his criminal background and notorious temper. Maximo arrived at the police station, his demeanor guarded and intimidating. Detective Reynolds started the questioning by asking about his relationship with Jesse Harper. Maximo spoke in a low, firm voice, describing how he and Jesse had once been close but had drifted apart after she got married. He admitted that he was still upset about their breakup and had difficulty letting go, but he denied having any involvement in her death. The detectives pressed Maximo about his whereabouts on the night of the murder. Maximo claimed he had been with his gang members at a local bar, The Globe, a well-known spot in downtown Athens. He provided names of several individuals who could vouch for him. Despite his alibi, Detective Reynolds and Officer Thompson were skeptical. They knew that Maximo's gang could easily cover for him if he was involved in a crime. The police checked Maximo's alibi by interviewing patrons and staff at The Globe. Some confirmed seeing him there, but the timeline was fuzzy, leaving gaps that could not be accounted for. Additionally, the police found no physical evidence linking Maximo directly to the crime scene, but his volatile nature and unresolved feelings for Jesse kept him under suspicion. Maximo's reaction during the interrogation was a mix of anger and frustration. He was cooperative to an extent but became increasingly agitated when the detectives suggested he might have a motive for killing Jesse. He vehemently denied any wrongdoing, insisting he was being targeted because of his past. Despite Maximo's strong denials, the detectives remained cautious. They knew that his history of violence and his lingering emotions for Jesse made him a potential suspect. They continued to gather evidence and monitor his activities, hoping to find something that could either incriminate or exonerate him. On August 25, 2010, the Athens Police Department made a breakthrough in the Jesse Harper murder case. The day was hot and sultry, with temperatures reaching into the low 90s. Detective Michael Reynolds and Officer Sarah Thompson were going through the evidence once again when it received the final forensic report. The report confirmed that the fingerprints on the silk scarf used to strangle Jesse matched those of Jess Owens. With this crucial piece of evidence, police were now confident that Jess Owens was the murderer. Jess, 27, had been Jesse's co-worker and secret lover. She was known for her friendly and sensitive nature, but struggled with jealousy and insecurity about Jesse's relationship with her husband, Dan Harper. Jess's emotions had spiraled out of control, leading her to commit the crime. Jess's motive was a combination of love, fear, and desperation. She couldn't bear the thought of losing Jesse to Dan. On the night of the murder, Jess went to Jesse's apartment, hoping to resolve their issues. However, the conversation quickly turned into a heated argument. In a fit of rage and desperation, Jess grabbed one of Jesse's silk scarves and strangled her. Detective Reynolds and Officer Thompson reviewed the timeline and evidence carefully before making their move. They knew they needed to arrest Jess before she could flee or destroy more evidence. The police arrived at Jess's apartment in the late afternoon, when the heat of the day had started to wane. Jess Owens was taken by surprise when the officers knocked on her door. She opened it, looking anxious and tired. The detectives informed her of the charges and placed her under arrest. Jess's reaction was a mix of shock and resignation. She didn't resist and was quietly taken to the police station. News of Jess's arrest spread quickly through Athens. Jesse Harper's family were relieved that the murderer had been caught, but heartbroken to learn it was someone Jesse had trusted and loved. The community, too, was shaken by the revelation that Jess Owens, a seemingly gentle and kind woman, could commit such a violent act. As Jess was led away in handcuffs, she seemed to accept her fate. The police had uncovered the truth, and justice for Jesse Harper was now within reach. The arrest of Jess Owens marked a significant step in the case, bringing closure to Jesse's grieving family and friends. The trial of Jess Owens began on October 15, 2010, in Athens, Georgia. The courtroom was packed with media, friends, and family, all eager to see justice served for Jesse Harper. The prosecutor, Lisa Bennett, was a determined 45-year-old with a reputation for being tough on crime. She opened the case by presenting the evidence against Jess, including the forensic report and the silk scarf used to strangle Jesse. Lisa argued that Jess's jealousy and desperation led her to commit the murder. The defense attorney, Laird Stevens, a 50-year-old known for his calm and collected demeanor, argued that Jess Owens had acted in a moment of emotional turmoil and did not intend to kill Jesse. He emphasized Jess's emotional instability and tried to paint her as a victim of her own feelings. He called on character witnesses to testify about Jess's generally kind and gentle nature, hoping to elicit sympathy from the jury. Throughout the trial, Jesse Harper's family sat in the front row, visibly emotional. Her mother, Carol Harper, often clutched a photo of Jesse, tears streaming down her face. The trial brought back painful memories for them, but they remained hopeful that justice would be served. The jury deliberated for 3 days, carefully considering all the evidence and arguments. On October 25, 2010, they reached a verdict. The courtroom was silent as the jury foreman stood up and announced the decision. Jess Owens was found guilty of second-degree murder. The verdict brought a mix of relief and sadness to Jesse's family. They were glad that justice had been served, but were also deeply saddened by the tragic circumstances. The judge sentenced Jess Owens to 25 years in prison. As the sentence was read, Jess showed little emotion. She seemed resigned to her fate, understanding that her actions had irreversible consequences.
The severity of the sentence was seen as appropriate by many, given the premeditated nature of the crime. The media covered the trial extensively, with local news stations like LUSB-TV and newspapers like the Athens Banner-Herald reporting on every detail. The public reaction was mixed. Some felt the sentence was just, while others believed it was too lenient, considering the loss of Jesse Harper's life. The trial and its outcome had a profound impact on all those involved. For Jesse's family, it marked the end of a painful chapter, but the loss they felt was permanent. The community of Athens was left to grapple with the reality that such a tragic event could occur in their town. After the trial of Jess Owens, light slowly began to move on for everyone involved, but the impact of Jesse Harper's murder was lasting. Jesse's family, particularly her mother, struggled with the grief of losing their vibrant daughter. Dan Harper, Jesse's husband, faced a different kind of aftermath. He had lost not only his wife, but also his reputation was tainted by the scandal of the love triangle. Dan, who had been a respected retired photography professor, decided to move to a smaller town in North Georgia to start anew. He spent his days focusing on his health and his passion for photography, hoping to find peace in his work. Jess Owens began serving her 25-year sentence at the Pulaski State Prison. She enrolled in educational programs and sought therapy to address her emotional issues. Jess's time in prison was marked by self-reflection and an effort to understand the depth of her actions and their consequences. She often expressed remorse for what she had done, writing letters to Jesse's family in hopes of finding some form of redemption. The Athens community was also affected by the murder and the trial. Local businesses, including the Starbucks where Jesse and Jess had worked, held a memorial for Jesse. Friends and coworkers gathered to share memories and honor her life. The case had brought the community closer, reminding everyone of the importance of supporting one another in times of tragedy. Maximo Rodriguez, once a suspect, faced his own legal battles unrelated to Jesse's murder. He continued to be involved in gang-related activities and was eventually convicted for his previous crimes. His life took a different path, but the investigation into Jesse's murder had brought his violent past into the spotlight. Life after the trial was about healing and finding ways to move forward for all those touched by Jesse Harper's tragic death. The community of Athens, along with Jesse's friends and family, worked to honor her memory and support each other through the lasting pain of their loss. Jessica Mitchell was a 35-year-old single mother and a successful real estate agent. She lived in a nice McMansion in Gilbert, Arizona, a peaceful suburb known for its friendly neighborhoods and good schools. Jessica was highly respected in her community for her professionalism and warm personality. She worked at a local real estate firm, helping families find their dream homes. Jessica had quite the past. She used to be a wild child and a party girl, attending Arizona State University, but dropping out at 18 when she found out she was pregnant with her daughter, Callie. Despite the challenges, Jessica was determined to give her daughter a good life. She worked hard to build her career while raising Callie as a single mother. Jessica was known for her strict parenting style, frequently spanking and withholding food from her daughter in the hopes that it would keep Callie on the right path. Jessica's relationship with her daughter was complicated. Callie, a 16-year-old teenager, was passionate and rebellious. She loved Taylor Swift and was obsessed with her music. Jessica tried to balance her work and parenting, enforcing rules to ensure Callie stayed focused on her studies. Callie was a talented student with dreams of attending Vassar College, but her desire to attend concerts and buy Taylor Swift merchandise often led to clashes with her mother. In her personal life, Jessica recently found happiness with Greg Barton, her boyfriend. Greg, 45, was charming and supportive, often traveling for work but trying to be there for Jessica when he could. Their relationship brought some joy into Jessica's life, especially amidst the tensions with Callie. Jessica's dreams were simple yet meaningful. She wanted to provide a stable home for Callie and continue to grow in her career. She looked forward to the future, hoping for more peace and happiness. In the days before her death, Jessica was busy with work and spending time with Greg. She had just closed a big deal at work and was planning a quiet weekend at home. Jessica's dedication to her career and her efforts to raise Callie showed her strength and determination. She was a beloved member of her community, and her sudden, tragic death would leave everyone in shock. On May 14, 2023, at about 8:30 in the morning, Greg Barton went to Jessica Mitchell's house to surprise her with breakfast. Greg had picked up coffee and bagels from Starbucks, hoping to spend a relaxing morning with Jessica. When he arrived at her house in a quiet Gilbert, Arizona neighborhood, he noticed the door was slightly open, which was unusual. Feeling uneasy, Greg called out Jessica's name as he walked inside. The house was eerily quiet. As he entered the living room, he was met with a horrifying sight. Jessica was lying on the floor, motionless and covered in blood. There was a strong smell of bleach in the air, making it hard to breathe. Jessica's face and body were disfigured by bleach, and it was clear she had been brutally beaten to death. Greg was in shock. His hands trembled as he dialed 911, his voice shaking as he tried to explain what he had found. "My girlfriend is dead," he stammered. "I think someone killed her." The dispatcher told him to stay calm and wait for the police to arrive. Greg couldn't bear to stay in the house, so he went outside and sat on the front steps, his mind racing. He couldn't believe this was happening. Jessica, the woman he loved, was gone. He felt a mix of grief, anger, and confusion. Neighbors began to gather, wondering what was going on. Greg could hear the distant sound of sirens growing louder. When the police arrived, they quickly secured the area and began their investigation. Officer Millie Rodriguez was one of the first on the scene. She approached Greg and asked him to recount what had happened. Greg did his best to describe the morning, but he was clearly distraught. The police entered the house and carefully examined the crime scene. They took photographs, collected samples, and searched for any clues that could help them understand what had happened. The discovery of Jessica's body shocked the community. Jessica was well-liked, and people couldn't believe something so terrible had happened to her. News of the murder spread quickly, with local media covering the story extensively. The once peaceful neighborhood was now the center of a tragic and horrifying event. When the police arrived at Jessica Mitchell's house on May 14, 2023, they quickly secured the area. Detective Sarah Wilkinsbury, a seasoned investigator known for her sharp eye, led the team. Officer Millie Rodriguez, who was first on the scene, briefed her on the situation. They knew they had to act fast to gather evidence before it was contaminated. The living room was a gruesome sight. Blood was splattered on the walls and furniture, and the strong smell of bleach filled the air. Jessica's body lay in the middle of the room, her face and body disfigured by the bleach. She had been beaten to death with a baseball bat, which was found nearby, covered in blood. The crime scene was chaotic, yet Detective Wilkinsbury and her team worked methodically. They took photographs of the entire area, paying special attention to the blood patterns and the position of Jessica's body. They collected samples of the bleach and blood, hoping to find any traces of the killer's DNA. Forensic experts dusted for fingerprints on the baseball bat and other surfaces. Detective Wilkinsbury noticed the brutality of the attack. The killer had shown extreme anger and had tried to erase their tracks with bleach. This suggested the murderer was not only violent, but also somewhat calculated. The team used various tools to investigate. They brought in a luminol spray to detect any bloodstains that might have been cleaned up. They also used ultraviolet lights to look for any hidden evidence. Detective Wilkinsbury interviewed Greg Barton, Jessica's boyfriend, who had found the body. Greg was visibly shaken but cooperated fully, answering all their questions. Greg explained his relationship with Jessica and mentioned the ongoing tensions between Jessica and her daughter, Callie. He expressed concern about Callie's behavior, noting her recent outburst. This information gave the police a potential lead. Outside the house, neighbors gathered, whispering in shock and fear. News vans from local stations arrived, setting up cameras and reporters. The peaceful neighborhood was now the center of a major crime investigation, and everyone wanted to know what had happened. Detective Wilkinsbury and her team worked late into the night, determined to find answers. They knew the first 48 hours were crucial in solving a murder case. Every detail mattered, and they were committed to bringing Jessica's killer to justice. The police began their investigation by looking into Greg Barton, Jessica Mitchell's boyfriend. Greg, 45, was known for his charm and supportive nature. He traveled often for work, which sometimes caused strain in their relationship. Greg had a clean criminal record and was seen as a stable influence in Jessica's life. However, his frequent travels raised some questions. Detective Sarah Wilkinsbury and her team brought Greg in for questioning. They wanted to know more about his relationship with Jessica and his whereabouts on the night of the murder. Greg explained that he had been out of town for work and returned early that morning to surprise Jessica with breakfast. He was visibly upset but answered their questions calmly. During the interrogation, Detective Wilkinsbury asked Greg about the tensions between Jessica and her daughter, Callie. Greg admitted that there had been arguments and that Callie had a fiery temperament. He expressed his concern about Callie's behavior but insisted he had no involvement in Jessica's death. Despite Greg's cooperation, the police needed to verify his alibi. They checked his travel records and interviewed his colleagues. Everything seemed to match up, but there was still something that bothered Detective Wilkinsbury. She decided to dig deeper into Greg's past. A breakthrough came when the police discovered that Greg had a secret habit of hiring escorts while traveling. Some of these escorts were young, barely over the age of consent. This revelation cast a shadow on Greg's character and raised new questions about his involvement in the crime. Detective Wilkinsbury confronted Greg with this new information. He looked surprised and became defensive, insisting that his private life had nothing to do with Jessica's murder. The police pressed him further, trying to see if there was any connection between his secret activities and Jessica's death. Greg's reaction was a mix of anger and frustration. He maintained his innocence, but was clearly shaken by the police's discoveries. The investigators continued to probe, looking for any inconsistencies in his story. They needed to be sure they weren't missing anything. As the investigation progressed, the police kept Greg under close surveillance. They knew he had the potential to be hiding more secrets. However, without concrete evidence linking him directly to the murder, they couldn't make an arrest. Police remained cautious, knowing that they had to explore all possible leads to uncover the truth behind Jessica Mitchell's tragic death. On May 18, 2023, 4 days after Jessica Mitchell's murder, the police received a tip about new evidence. It was a sunny afternoon in Gilbert, Arizona, and Detective Sarah Wilkinsbury and her team were at the station when the call came in. The tip came from a neighbor who had seen something unusual in the Mitchells' backyard the day before. The police rushed to Jessica's house to investigate. When they arrived, they began searching the backyard carefully. Officer Millie Rodriguez noticed a partially buried box near the fence. Bhin dug it up and found a small locked metal box. They took it back to the station to open it carefully, using tools to avoid damaging any potential evidence inside. Inside the box, they found a diary. It was Callie Mitchell's diary, filled with her thoughts and feelings. Detective Wilkinsbury began reading through it, hoping to find clues. The diary revealed Callie's deep obsession with Taylor Swift and her growing resentment toward her mother. Callie wrote about feeling trapped by Jessica's strict rules and how she longed for freedom. As Detective Wilkinsbury read further, she discovered entries where Callie expressed intense anger toward her mother for not letting her attend Taylor Swift's Eras Tour. One entry, dated just days before the murder, mentioned Callie's frustration reaching a boiling point. This was a significant find, as it provided a possible motive for the crime. The diary also mentioned an online friend Callie had been talking to, who seemed to encourage her negative feelings. This person, who claimed to be a fellow Taylor Swift fan, pushed Callie to act on her anger. Detective Wilkinsbury noted this and decided to investigate further, hoping to trace the online interactions. The police also looked into Callie's online activities. They found messages from the mysterious online friend, urging Callie to stand up to her mother. This friend's identity remained unknown, but the police were determined to track them down. The discovery of Callie's diary and the online messages added a new layer to the investigation. Detective Wilkinsbury and her team knew they were getting closer to the truth. The new evidence provided crucial insights into Callie's state of mind and the possible influence of the unknown online friend, bringing them one step closer to solving the case. With the new evidence from Callie Mitchell's diary, the police turned their attention to her. Callie, 16, was known for her fiery temper and obsession with Taylor Swift. She was a bright student with dreams of attending Vassar College, but her relationship with her mother, Jessica, was often strained. Callie's passion for music and her rebellious nature led to frequent clashes at home. On May 19, 2023, Detective Sarah Wilkinsbury and her team brought Callie in for further questioning. Callie arrived at the station, looking nervous but trying to stay calm. Detective Wilkinsbury began by asking Callie about her relationship with her mother. Callie admitted they had arguments but insisted she loved her mother and would never harm her. The detectives then showed Callie the entries from her diary. The entries detailed Callie's growing resentment towards Jessica and her frustration over not being allowed to attend Taylor Swift's Eras Tour. One particular entry mentioned feeling trapped and desperate. Callie looked pale and teary-eyed as she read the words she had written. Detective Wilkinsbury asked Callie about her online friend who had encouraged her negative feelings. Callie explained that she met this friend in a Taylor Swift fan forum. They had bonded over their mutual love for Swift's music and shared their frustrations. This friend, who called themselves Swiftie Pal, had suggested Callie stand up to her mother. The police examined Callie's online messages with Swifty Pal. The messages showed Swifty Pal pushing Callie to act on her anger. Phrases like "you need to break free from that bleep" and "don't let that bleep control you" stood out as Swifty Pal twisted Taylor Swift's lyrics to say that she approved of violence against strict parents. Callie admitted that she felt influenced by Swifty Pal but still denied any involvement in her mother's murder. Detective Wilkins Bree pressed Callie about her whereabouts on the night of the murder. Callie said she was in her room, listening to Swift's 1989 album and chatting online. Her alibi seemed weak, but there was no concrete evidence linking her directly to the crime scene yet. The police decided to search Callie's room for more clues. They found Taylor Swift posters, concert tickets, and more diary entries. One entry, dated the night of the murder, was particularly disturbing. It mentioned feeling overwhelmed with rage and hinted at taking drastic actions. The investigation into Callie revealed a troubled teenager with deep emotional struggles. Her obsession with Taylor Swift and the influence of an online friend painted a complex picture. While Callie maintained her innocence, the evidence against her was mounting. The police knew they had to proceed carefully to uncover the full truth. The investigation also led the police to look into Jake Barry Sullivan. Barry, 28, had a criminal history that included burglary and assault, especially targeting single mothers. He was known for being unpredictable and dangerous. In May 2023, Barry was homeless and moved around frequently to avoid the police. Some neighbors had seen him near Jessica Mitchell's house around the time of the murder, making him a person of interest. On May 20, 2023, Detective Sarah Wilkins Bree and her team tracked down Barry. They found him staying in an abandoned building on the outskirts of Gilbert, Arizona. When the police arrived, Barry tried to run, but they quickly caught him. He was taken to the station for questioning. Barry was a tough and uncooperative suspect. During the interrogation, he denied any involvement in Jessica Mitchell's murder. He claimed he was just passing through the neighborhood and had nothing to do with the crime. Detective Wilkins Bree pressed him for details about his whereabouts on the night of the murder, but Barry's story was full of holes. The police searched Barry's belongings and found a few suspicious items. There was a pair of gloves with traces of bleach, similar to what was found at the crime scene. They also discovered a baseball bat, which could potentially be the murder weapon. Barry became defensive when asked about these items, saying they were just random things he found on the streets. Detective Wilkins Bree and her team decided to dig deeper into Barry's past. They discovered he had a history of violence against women, particularly single mothers. This pattern made him a strong suspect in Jessica's case. The police also interviewed people who knew Barry. Some mentioned his aggressive behavior and how he often talked about getting back at society. Despite the mounting evidence, Barry continued to deny his involvement in the murder. His reaction was a mix of anger and frustration. The police knew they needed more solid proof to link him directly to the crime. They decided to run forensic tests on the items found in Barry's possession to see if they matched the evidence from the crime scene. As the investigation into Barry progressed, the police remained vigilant. They understood that he was a dangerous individual with a history of targeting vulnerable women. While Barry's behavior and past crimes made him a prime suspect, the police were careful not to jump to conclusions without concrete evidence. The search for the true murderer of Jessica Mitchell continued as they pieced together the clues from multiple leads. On May 22, 2023, the breakthrough in the case came when the police finally identified the true murderer, Callie Mitchell. Callie, 16, was Jessica Mitchell's daughter. The investigation into her diary and online messages had revealed her deep-seated anger and resentment towards her mother. Callie's obsession with Taylor Swift and the influence of an online acquaintance had driven her to a breaking point. Detective Sarah Wilkins Bree and her team pieced together the events leading to Jessica's murder. Callie had recently been forbidden by her mother to attend Taylor Swift's record-breaking Eras tour. This decision unleashed a torrent of rage and frustration in Callie. On the night of May 14, 2023, in a fit of uncontrollable anger, Callie grabbed a baseball bat and brutally beat her mother to death in their living room. To obscure her identity, she poured bleach over Jessica's body, disfiguring her beyond recognition. The police discovered a hidden diary in Callie's room, revealing her obsessive thoughts about Taylor Swift and her growing resentment towards her mother. Additionally, they found that Callie had been manipulated by an online acquaintance posing as a fellow Swiftie. This person had encouraged Callie to act on her darker impulses, misquoting Taylor Swift's lyrics to fuel her anger against her mother. Armed with this evidence, the police moved quickly to arrest Callie.
It was early in the morning when they arrived at the Mitchell residence. Callie was still asleep when the police knocked on her door. She answered, looking groggy and confused. When the officers informed her that she was under arrest for the murder of her mother, Callie's reaction was one of shock and disbelief. She cried and insisted that she didn't mean to do it, that it was all a terrible mistake. The arrest of Callie Mitchell sent shockwaves through the community. Jessica's friends and family were devastated by the news. They couldn't believe that the sweet, bright girl they knew had committed such a horrendous act. Jessica's sister was particularly heartbroken. She described Jessica as a loving and dedicated mother who only wanted the best for her daughter. As Callie was taken into custody, the community grappled with the tragedy that had unfolded in their midst. The arrest marked a turning point in the investigation, bringing some closure to Jessica's loved ones, while opening up a new chapter in the legal proceedings against Callie. The police continued their work, preparing for the upcoming trial and ensuring that all the evidence was thoroughly examined. The trial of Callie Mitchell began on June 15, 2023, and the courtroom was packed with people eager to hear the details of this shocking case. The prosecution, led by District Attorney James Collins, argued that Callie's actions were premeditated. Collins, a seasoned attorney known for his meticulous preparation, presented the evidence clearly. He highlighted Callie's diary entries and online messages, showing her growing anger and resentment towards her mother. He emphasized the brutality of the crime, describing how Callie had beaten her mother to death with a baseball bat and then poured bleach over her body to hide her identity. On the defense side was attorney Linda Chewbacca, a compassionate lawyer who specialized in juvenile cases. Chewbacca argued that Callie was not fully aware of her actions due to the influence of an online acquaintance who had manipulated her. She painted a picture of a troubled teenager who was overwhelmed by emotions and unable to think clearly. Chewbacca urged the jury to consider Callie's age and the psychological manipulation she had endured. Throughout the trial, Jessica Mitchell's family watched with heavy hearts. They were torn between seeking justice for Jessica and feeling sympathy for Callie, who was also a victim in some ways. Jessica's sister, Amanda, often broke down in tears, remembering her sister's warmth and dedication as a mother. The jury deliberated for 3 days before returning with a verdict. On June 25, 2023, Callie Mitchell was found guilty of second-degree murder. The judge, understanding the complex nature of the case, sentenced Callie to 20 years in a juvenile detention facility, with the possibility of parole after 10 years. The verdict brought mixed reactions. Some felt the punishment was too lenient, given the brutal nature of the crime. Others believed it was fair, considering Callie's age and the manipulation she had experienced. District Attorney Collins expressed satisfaction with the outcome, stating that justice had been served, while Defense Attorney Chewbacca expressed hope that Callie would receive the help she needed. Jessica's family had a range of emotions. They were relieved that the trial was over and that there was some accountability for Jessica's death. However, they were also deeply saddened by the loss of both Jessica and the future they had envisioned for Callie. The community of Gilbert, Arizona, continued to grapple with the aftermath of the trial. Friends and neighbors of the Mitchell family expressed their condolences and support. The trial and its verdict left a lasting impact on everyone involved, serving as a reminder of the tragic consequences of unchecked emotions and online influences. After the trial, life for everyone involved in the case of Jessica Mitchell's murder changed drastically. Callie Mitchell was sent to a juvenile detention facility. There she began attending therapy sessions to address her anger issues and the psychological manipulation she had endured. Callie also continued her education within the facility, where teachers and counselors worked hard to help her find a new path. Jessica Mitchell's family struggled to move on. Her sister, Amanda, took on the responsibility of handling Jessica's affairs and supporting her niece from afar. Amanda often visited Callie, hoping to rebuild their relationship and provide the support Callie needed during her rehabilitation. Jessica's friends and colleagues in the real estate community organized a charity event in her honor, raising funds for domestic violence awareness and support programs. Detective Sarah Wilkins-Bree and her team moved on to other cases, but the Jessica Mitchell case left a lasting impression on them. They continue to use the lessons learned from this case in their work, particularly the importance of understanding the psychological aspects of crime. Detective Wilkins-Bree became an advocate for better mental health resources in the community, often speaking at local schools and events about the importance of seeking help and support. Barton, Jessica's boyfriend, faced his own challenges.
Although he was cleared of any involvement in the murder, the revelations about his private life caused significant damage to his reputation and personal relationships. Greg decided to take a break from his career and focus on rebuilding his life. He moved to a new city, seeking a fresh start away from the painful memories of Gilbert. Jake Barry Sullivan, the known felon who was initially a suspect, continued his transient lifestyle. After being released from questioning, he moved to another state, still struggling with his own issues. The police kept an eye on Barry, knowing he could be a potential threat in the future. Overall, the aftermath of the trial showed the far-reaching effects of the crime. While justice was served, the emotional and psychological impact on everyone involved was profound. The case highlighted the importance of community support, mental health resources, and the need for vigilance in protecting vulnerable individuals from harmful influences. Thank you for joining us on True Crime Case Files. Today's story reminds us of the profound impact of family dynamics and the unforeseen consequences of unchecked emotions. Stay tuned for our next episode as we continue to explore the intricate and often tragic world of true crime. David Dayne was a 48-year-old kindergarten teacher who lived in Tampa, Florida. He taught at Sunny Days Kindergarten, where he had worked for 25 years. David was well loved by his students and their parents. He was known for his engaging teaching style and charismatic personality. David lived with his wife, Jennifer, and their 2 teenage children, Emily and Jacob. The Dayne family was active in their church and often participated in community events. David had always dreamed of being a teacher, despite being a man in a predominantly female field, and was passionate about his work. His classroom was filled with colorful posters, educational toys, and books from popular series like Magic Treehouse and the Berenstain Bears. He often used songs and games to make learning fun for his students. Despite his professional success, David had a complicated personal life. He and Jennifer had been married for 20 years, but their relationship had grown strained. Jennifer, a stay-at-home mom, had become suspicious of David's frequent absences and odd behavior. She often noticed him texting late at night and leaving the house without explanation. In the days leading up to his death, David's behavior became more erratic. He missed family dinners and church events, claiming he had important meetings. Jennifer grew increasingly frustrated, and their arguments became more frequent. Friends noticed that David seemed distracted and preoccupied. On the night before his death, David was seen leaving a local diner, the Four Green Fields, where he had met with several individuals described as suspicious. Witnesses reported that David appeared nervous and agitated. On the morning of June 14, 2017, Carla Rodriguez, a fellow teacher at Sunny Days Kindergarten, arrived at the school early. It was around 7:30 a.m., and she was preparing for the day ahead. Carla noticed something unusual as she walked past the playground. David Dayne's body was lying on the ground near the jungle gym. Carla was shocked and terrified. David's body was covered in blood, and it was clear something terrible had happened. She saw that he had been shot and that his eyes were missing. Carla immediately called 911, her hands shaking as she dialed. "There's been a murder at Sunny Days Kindergarten," she told the operator, trying to stay calm. The news of the murder spread quickly. Reporters from local media outlets like the Tampa Bay Times and television stations such as WLA News Channel 8 rushed to the scene. By 8:00 a.m., the kindergarten was surrounded by police cars and news vans. Carla was still in shock, but she managed to describe what she had seen to Detective Mercer. She explained that David had seemed fine the day before, although he had been acting a bit distracted lately. Carla couldn't believe that something so horrible had happened at their school. As police surveyed the playground, they noted the blood spattered on the ground and the gruesome condition of David's body. It was a chilling sight, and it was clear that this was a violent and deliberate act. The playground, usually a place of joy and laughter, was now a crime scene. The police set up a perimeter around the kindergarten and began their investigation. They interviewed other teachers and staff members, searching for any clues that might explain what had happened. Parents who arrived to drop off their children were turned away, and the school was closed for the day. News of the murder spread throughout Tampa, and soon the entire community was talking about the shocking event. People were frightened and confused, wondering who could have committed such a terrible crime. The discovery of David Dayne's body marked the beginning of a complex and disturbing investigation. The police were determined to uncover the truth and bring the perpetrator to justice. The police arrived quickly at Sunny Days Kindergarten after Carla Rodriguez's 911 call on the morning of June 14, 2017. By 8:00 a.m., Detective John Mercer and his team were on the scene. Detective Mercer, a 45-year-old investigator known for his attention to detail, took charge immediately. Detective Mercer instructed officers to secure the playground and keep onlookers and media at a distance. The scene was grim. David Dayne's body lay near the jungle gym, with blood spattered on the ground and equipment. He had been shot twice with a 9mm, and his eyes had been gouged out with a knife. The brutality of the crime was shocking. Detective Mercer and his team began their investigation. They carefully examined the playground, taking photos and collecting evidence. They found 2 9mm shell casings near the body. Forensic experts took DNA swabs and collected fingerprints from the playground equipment. They also gathered samples of the blood for analysis. The crime scene was a mess. The once cheerful playground, usually filled with children's laughter, was now a place of horror. Brightly colored swings and slides contrasted sharply with the dark reality of the murder. Detective Mercer noted the eeriness of the scene and the contrast between the violence and the innocent setting. The police interviewed Carla Rodriguez, who had discovered the body. Carla described her shock and fear when she saw David. She also mentioned that David had seemed distracted lately, but hadn't shown any signs of fear or distress. Detective Mercer and his team also spoke with other teachers and staff members. They learned that David had been a well-liked teacher, but had recently exhibited unusual behavior. He often stayed late at the school and had been seen with people who were not staff or parents. The investigation extended beyond the school. Detectives visited David's home and interviewed his wife, Jennifer Dayne. Jennifer admitted that their marriage had been strained due to David's frequent absences and odd behavior. The police also checked David's phone and computer for clues. They found numerous text messages and emails suggesting that David was involved in activities outside his teaching job. These messages hinted at secret meetings and possible illegal activities. The crime scene investigation at Sunnyday's kindergarten was thorough and meticulous. Detective Mercer and his team were determined to find out who had committed this brutal murder and why. The playground, once a symbol of joy, had become the starting point of a complex and disturbing case. The police turned their attention to Jennifer Dayne, David's wife. Jennifer, 39, was a stay-at-home mom devoted to their 2 teenage children, Emily and Jacob. Known for her active role in her church and community, Jennifer seemed like the perfect wife and mother. However, the police needed to investigate everyone close to David. Jennifer was brought in for questioning on June 15, 2017, the day after David's body was found. Detective John Mercer led the interrogation. He asked Jennifer about her relationship with David and her activities on the night of the murder. Jennifer described her marriage as strained. She admitted that David had been acting strangely for months. He often came home late and made excuses about meetings and work. Jennifer suspected he was having an affair but had no proof. Despite her suspicions, she claimed she had no idea about his involvement in illicit activities. During the interrogation, Jennifer remained calm. She answered questions clearly and showed no signs of panic. However, her resentment toward David was evident. She talked about the frequent arguments they had and how she felt abandoned by him. Jennifer mentioned she had considered hiring a private investigator to follow David, but decided against it. The police also looked into Jennifer's activities on the night of the murder. She said she was at home with her children, which Emily and Jacob confirmed. The family had dinner together and watched the Disney movie Moana. Jennifer insisted she had no reason to kill David, despite their marital problems. Detective Mercer and his team checked Jennifer's phone records and found nothing suspicious. There were no late-night calls or texts that indicated she was involved in the murder. They also spoke to neighbors and friends who vouched for her character and described her as a loving mother and dedicated church member. Despite the lack of evidence directly linking Jennifer to the crime, the police couldn't ignore her motive. Jennifer had a reason to be angry and hurt by David's actions. Detective Mercer noted that while she seemed innocent, her calm demeanor could be a sign of hiding something. The investigation into Jennifer Dayne left the police with more questions than answers. While she had a possible motive, there was no concrete evidence tying her to the murder. The police knew they needed to continue digging to uncover the truth. On June 16, 2017, just 2 days after David Dayne's body was discovered, new evidence emerged that would change the direction of the investigation. It was a hot and unbearably humid day in Tampa, Florida. Around 2 p.m., police officers discovered new evidence that would change the course of their investigation. A maintenance worker was cleaning the storage room at Sunny Hills Kindergarten when he found a hidden camera behind a stack of books.
Confused and scared, he immediately called the police. Detectives arrived at the scene quickly. They carefully collected the hidden camera and took it to the police station for further examination. The camera contained shocking footage. It showed David Dayne filming and participating in dozens of adult movies filmed in the kindergarten after hours. Even more disturbing, the footage revealed David forcing the kindergarten kids to fight each other in something he called Hunger Games Jr. The detectives were horrified. They could not believe what they were seeing. The children looked scared and hurt as he told them he would withhold food from them as encouragement to fight more aggressively. They knew they had to act fast to protect the kids and find out who else was involved. Detective Mercer, who was known for determination and compassion, was deeply affected by the footage. He vowed to bring justice to the victims. The police department called in a special team of forensic experts to analyze the footage. They used advanced software to enhance the video quality and identify the people involved. The experts worked around the clock, carefully studying every detail. They found evidence of at least 25 different women in the videos participating in sex with David, including a woman named Lara Watro. The police also discovered financial records showing large sums of money being transferred to David's account from various sources. This money was believed to be from bets placed on the children's fights. Detective Mercer, who was also known for his analytical skills, carefully traced the transactions back to their sources. This led to several new leads, including people who placed bets on the fights. In addition, police have found a series of texts between David and Lara Watro. The messages were sexually explicit and revealed that David had been having an affair with Lara, beyond their involvement in adult movies. This discovery added a new layer to the case and provided the police with a potential new suspect. After discovering the hidden camera footage, the police turned their attention to Lara Watro, one of the estimated 25 women David Dayne had been sexually involved with. Lara was a 21-year-old with a fierce and independent personality. She worked as a barista at a local Starbucks and was known for her intense and passionate nature. On June 17, 2017, detectives visited Lara at her apartment. It was a humid and hot morning in Tampa. Lara was initially nervous but agreed to talk. She admitted she first met David while filming an adult movie, using the name Daisy Hyman, filmed at the kindergarten where he worked. She described David as charming and persuasive, someone who could easily convince people to do what he wanted. Lara told the detectives she had grown increasingly frustrated with David. He had promised to leave his wife, Jennifer, for her, but he never did. She was angry and felt betrayed. Lara explained that she knew about David's double life, but was too scared to go to the police. She feared for her safety and said she didn't know anything about the children involved in the fight ring. During the interrogation, Lara remained calm but showed signs of emotional distress. She provided the detectives with more details about the adult movies and the fight ring. Lara revealed that David was making a lot of money from these illegal activities and that many notables in the community were involved. She gave names of individuals who placed bets on the children's fights, which gave the police several new leads to investigate. Lara's information was crucial. It helped the detectives understand the extent of David's operations and the number of people involved. Detective Mercer, known for his empathetic approach, could see that Lara was a victim in her own way. She was manipulated and used by David, much like the other women and children. Mercer assured Lara that the police would protect her if she cooperated fully with the investigation. The detectives also checked Lara's phone records and found numerous text messages and calls between her and David. These messages confirmed her story about their relationship and David's promises to leave his wife. Lara's cooperation gave the police valuable insights and led them closer to uncovering the full truth about David Dayne's secret life and the people involved in his crimes. After speaking with Lara Watro, the detectives turned their focus to Jordan Alarcon Perico. Jordan was a 24-year-old single father and construction worker who had recently moved to Tampa from Cuba. He had discovered unusual bruises on his son's body and was deeply concerned. On June 18, 2017, at around 11 a.m., Detectives Maria Lopes and John Harris visited Jordan at his construction site. It was another hot, sunny day in Tampa. Jordan was tough and protective, traits that helped him survive the hardships of fleeing Cuba. When the detectives approached him, he was initially defensive but agreed to speak when they explained the situation. Jordan told the detectives that he had become suspicious when his son, Nathaniel, a student at Sunny Hills Kindergarten, came home with bruises and a scared look. Nathaniel eventually confessed that he was forced to fight other children at school or he wouldn't be fed. Jordan was furious and confronted David Dayne just days before his murder. He described David as smug and dismissive during their confrontation. During the interrogation, Jordan's anger was evident. He felt betrayed by someone he trusted to care for his child. However, he maintained his innocence, insisting he did not kill David. He admitted to confronting David but claimed he walked away when David threatened to call the police on him. The detectives carefully examined Jordan's alibi for the time of David's murder. They checked his work records and spoke to his co-workers, who confirmed that Jordan was at the construction site during the time of the murder. This alibi made it unlikely that Jordan was the killer. Detective Mercer, known for his keen sense of intuition, felt that Jordan's anger was genuine but not indicative of guilt. He believed that he was a protective father who wanted to shield his son from further harm. Detective Harris, with his analytical approach, focused on verifying Jordan's statements and looking for any inconsistencies. The police also examined Jordan's phone records and found no evidence of communication with David or any of the individuals involved in the adult movies or fight ring. This further supported Jordan's claim that he was not part of David's criminal activities. Jordan's information added another layer to the investigation. It confirmed the existence of the fight ring and provided insight into the abuse the children endured. While Jordan was not the murderer, his account helped the detectives build a clearer picture of David Dayne's secret and dark life. The detectives knew they were getting closer to uncovering the full truth and finding justice for the victims. On June 25, 2017, the police pieced together all the evidence and identified Jennifer Dayne, David's wife, as the murderer. Jennifer was 39 years old and the stay-at-home mom devoted to their 2 teenage children. She was active in her church and often seen volunteering at local events. In short, she was the perfect woman. However, her life took a dark turn when she discovered David's numerous affairs and his involvement in filming adult movies at the kindergarten where he worked. Jennifer's world shattered further when she found out about the underground fight ring where David forced the children he cared for to fight. Driven by anger and a sense of betrayal, Jennifer decided to end David's double life. She saw herself as a biblical angel of mercy, determined to protect the children from further harm. On the evening of June 30, 2017, Jennifer confronted David at the kindergarten playground. She shot him twice with a 9mm gun and then gouged out his eyes with a knife, a symbolic act representing her disgust and anger. She believed that by doing this, she was saving the children and putting an end to David's heinous acts. Detectives worked tirelessly to connect the dots. They found traces of gunpowder on Jennifer's clothes and discovered a 9mm gun hidden in their garage. The gun matched the bullets found in David's body. Additionally, phone records showed Jennifer had discovered David's secret activities through text messages and emails she had access. On June 15, at 3 p.m., the police arrived at the Dayne residence to arrest Jennifer. It was a tense and emotional scene. Jennifer appeared calm and did not resist arrest. She seemed almost relieved that her ordeal was over. Detective Lopez, known for her compassionate approach, carefully explained the charges to Jennifer, who listened quietly. The news of Jennifer's arrest shocked the community. David's double life and the truth about the kindergarten fight ring left many parents horrified. When Jennifer was taken into custody, David's family had mixed reactions. Some were angry and felt betrayed by Jennifer, while others were sympathetic, understanding the rage and horror she must have felt. Jennifer's arrest brought a sense of closure to the investigation. The detectives knew they had uncovered the full truth and brought the person responsible to justice. The case highlighted the importance of vigilance and the need to protect the innocent from those who would harm them. The trial of Jennifer Dayne for the murder of her husband, David Dayne, began on September 10, 2018. The courtroom was filled with reporters from local news outlets like the Tampa Bay Times and WFLA News Channel 8. The case had garnered significant attention due to the shocking nature of the crime and the revelations about David's double life. The prosecution was led by Assistant State Attorney Mark Hayes, a 50-year-old known for his meticulous approach and strong courtroom presence. In his opening statement, Hayes painted Jennifer as a betrayed and enraged wife who sought revenge for her husband's infidelity and secret activities. He detailed how Jennifer had discovered David's affairs and his involvement in the underground fighting ring. Hayes argued that Jennifer had planned the murder meticulously, shooting David and then gouging out his eyes to make a statement. The defense attorney, Callie Mitchell, a 45-year-old with a reputation for passionately defending her clients, argued that Jennifer was a devoted wife and mother pushed to the brink by her husband's betrayal.
Mitchell emphasized Jennifer's role in the community and her dedication to her family. She claimed that Jennifer had no prior history of violence and suggested that the real murderer could be one of David's associates from the fighting ring or his many affairs. The trial lasted for 3 weeks. Testimonies from witnesses, including Carla Rodriguez and Lara Watro, painted a picture of David's complicated life. The prosecution presented evidence, including the shell casings found at the scene and Jennifer's text messages expressing her anger and hurt. Throughout the trial, the Dayne family's emotions ran high. Emily and Jacob, David and Jennifer's teenage children, were often seen in the courtroom, looking devastated. Friends and neighbors who had known the Daynes for years struggled to reconcile the loving family they knew with the dark secrets being revealed. On October 2, 2018, the jury delivered their verdict. Jennifer Dayne was found guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom was silent as the judge read the sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. Jennifer showed little reaction, her face pale and expressionless. The impact of the verdict was profound. David's family and friends expressed relief that justice had been served, but there was also a deep sense of loss and sorrow. The community of Tampa was left to grapple with the reality that a beloved teacher and community member had led such a double life and met such a tragic end. After Jennifer Dayne was sentenced to life in prison, the community of Tampa tried to return to normal. However, the shock of David Dayne's murder and the revelations of his secret life left a lasting impact on everyone involved. Jennifer Dayne began her life sentence at the Florida State Prison. She maintained her innocence, often writing letters to her children, Emily and Jacob, who struggled with the loss of both parents. Jennifer's church and some friends continued to support her, believing she had been pushed to the edge by David's betrayal. Emily, 17, and Jacob, 15, moved in with their maternal grandparents. They tried to continue their lives, but the trauma of their father's death and their mother's imprisonment affected them deeply. Both teens received counseling and support from their school, Jefferson High, to help them cope with the tragedy. They found solace in activities they loved. Emily focused on her art, and Jacob immersed himself in sports, particularly soccer. Detective John Mercer and his team returned to their regular duties, but couldn't forget the Dayne case. The investigation had been one of the most complex of Mercer's career. He felt a mixture of satisfaction and sorrow knowing they had solved the case, but at the cost of a family's destruction. Lara Watro, the young woman involved with David, moved away from Tampa. The media attention and public scrutiny made it impossible for her to continue her life there. She relocated to Orlando, where she started over, working at another coffee shop and taking classes at a community college. Lara remained haunted by her connection to the case, but was determined to build a new life. Jordan Alarcon Perico, the father who had confronted David about the underground fighting ring, returned to his job as a construction worker. He focused on providing a stable life for his son, who was a student at Sunny Days Kindergarten. Jordan became more involved in his son's education and activities, ensuring his child was safe and happy. The staff and students at Sunny Days Kindergarten struggled to move on from the tragedy that had occurred on their playground. The school brought in counselors to help the children and teachers deal with their grief and fear. Over time, the laughter of children playing returned to the playground, but the memory of David Dayne's murder lingered. The community of Tampa, while shocked by the events, rallied together. Local organizations held fundraisers to support the Dayne children and increase awareness about domestic violence and the importance of mental health. Life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy, but the lessons learned from the Dayne case remained with everyone. The story of David Dayne is a tragic reminder of the hidden complexities that can lurk behind seemingly perfect lives. His double life led to a violent end, leaving a lasting impact on his family and community. Suzette Anaki was a 44-year-old manager at Ruby Tuesdays, a popular restaurant chain known for its American fare and salad bar. She lived in a large suburban McMansion in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, a city known for its friendly neighborhoods and good schools. Suzette was an ambitious and outgoing woman. Her friends and family described her as someone who lived life to the fullest. She loved adventure sports like hiking and rock climbing, and she often spent her weekends exploring nature trails and cliffs. Suzette's educational journey began at Broken Arrow High School, where she was known for her excellent grades and participation in various clubs. She later attended the University of Oklahoma, where she majored in business management. Her education helped her rise quickly in her career, and she was deeply committed to her job at Ruby Tuesdays, where she was a respected manager. Suzette had a close-knit family. She was married to Dany Anaki and she had a teenage daughter named Lana Anaki from her ex-husband Ross. Her relationship with Dany was complex, with periods of intense affection and moments of jealousy. Lana, an 18-year-old college student at Oklahoma State University, looked up to her mother and shared her adventurous spirit. Suzette's friends described her as fiercely loyal and always ready to help those in need. She was the kind of person who made everyone feel special. She had a magnetic personality that drew people to her. Her colleagues admired her work ethic and her ability to manage the restaurant efficiently while maintaining a friendly atmosphere. In the days leading up to her death, Suzette was particularly excited about a new managerial project at work. She had been working on improving the restaurant's customer service and menu auctions. She also planned a weekend hiking trip with her friends to celebrate the successful completion of the project. Suzette's dreams included further advancing her career and spending more time with her family and friends. She was looking forward to the upcoming fall season, with plans to visit local pumpkin patches and attend the Tulsa State Fair. On the evening of September 13, 2002, Suzette spent time with her family, discussing their plans for the weekend. She was in high spirits, full of hope and excitement for the future. Sadly, her dreams were cut short the following morning when her life was tragically taken. On the morning of September 14, 2002, the sky was overcast, and a light drizzle fell over Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. At around 7:30 a.m., Dany Anaki, an 18-year-old college student, woke up and went to her mother's large walk-in closet in her family's large suburban home. Lana had plans to meet friends later that day, but first, she wanted to check on her mother, Suzette. As Lana entered the closet, she was met with a horrific sight. Her mother, Suzette Anaki, lay lifeless on the floor in a pool of blood. Several belts, possibly the murder weapon, were scattered around her body. Lana's initial shock turned to sheer panic. She screamed and fell to her knees beside her mother. Struggling to maintain her composure, Lana reached for the phone and dialed 911, her voice shaking as she reported the brutal scene. The 911 call was received at 7:35 a.m. Lana, barely able to speak through her tears, described what she saw. The dispatcher stayed on the line with her, offering calm reassurances until the police arrived. Lana's frantic call sent a wave of urgency through the Broken Arrow Police Department. When the first responders arrived, they found Lana in a state of deep shock, sitting on the front steps of the house, her clothes stained with blood from holding her mother. The officers quickly secured the scene, ensuring no one could enter or leave the house while they began their investigation. The discovery of Suzette's body sent shockwaves through the Broken Arrow community. News quickly spread, and by midday, local media, including the Tulsa World newspaper and TV stations like KOTV Channel 6, were reporting on the tragic incident. Neighbors and friends gathered outside the Anaki home, offering their support and expressing their disbelief. Suzette Anaki's murder marked the beginning of a complex investigation. The police were determined to uncover the truth behind her brutal death and bring her killer to justice. As they worked tirelessly, the impact of Suzette's death resonated through the community, leaving everyone grappling with the loss of a beloved friend, colleague, and mother. When the Broken Arrow Police Department received Dany Anaki's frantic 911 call on September 14, 2002, they knew they had to act fast. The sky was overcast, and a light drizzle continued as officers rushed to the scene. Detective Mark Corley, a seasoned investigator with 15 years on the force, led the team. Known for his sharp eye and calm demeanor, Corley arrived with his partner, Detective Susan Alara, who had a reputation for her meticulous attention to detail. When Corley and Alara entered the Anaki home, they were met with a gruesome scene. Suzette Anaki's body lay in the middle of her large walk-in closet, surrounded by belts stained with blood. The room showed clear signs of a struggle. Blood splatters covered the walls and furniture, indicating the violent nature of the attack. The detectives noted the presence of nunchucks, hinting at a possible history of abuse. The police quickly secured the crime scene, ensuring that no evidence would be disturbed. Corley began by documenting everything meticulously. He photographed the body, the belts, and the nunchucks, making sure to capture every detail. Alara, meanwhile, collected physical evidence, carefully bagging the belts for forensic analysis. They found no signs of forced entry, suggesting that Suzette likely knew her attacker. The medical examiner arrived shortly after to examine Suzette's body. The deep lacerations caused by the belts confirmed that Suzette had died from blunt force trauma. The brutal nature of the attack indicated intense rage,
pointing to a personal motive. While Coralie and Lara worked inside, uniformed officers canvassed the neighborhood. They interviewed neighbors and potential witnesses, hoping to gather information that could lead to a suspect. One neighbor mentioned hearing loud arguments from the Anaki home the night before, adding a crucial detail to the timeline.
Detective Coralie and his team continued their investigation late into the evening. They used luminol to detect any hidden bloodstains and dusted for fingerprints. The evidence pointed to a personal and deeply emotional motive behind Suzette's murder. As they processed the crime scene, the detectives were determined to uncover the truth and bring justice to Suzette and her grieving family.
The thorough work of the Broken Arrow Police Department laid the foundation for solving this tragic case. Every piece of evidence, every witness statement, brought them one step closer to identifying Suzette's killer. The first suspect in Suzette Anaki's murder was her husband, Dany Anaki. At 48 years old, Dany was known for his intelligence and meticulous nature. He worked as an accountant, a job that suited his detail-oriented personality. However, those who knew Dany also described him as emotionally distant and sometimes jealous, especially regarding his relationship with Suzette. Detective Mark Coralie and Detective Susan Lara brought Dany in for questioning on the afternoon of September 14, 2002. The police station was abuzz with activity as the news of Suzette's murder spread. Dany appeared calm but nervous, a stark contrast to the horror that had unfolded in his home. Coralie started the interrogation by asking Dany to recount his activities the night before. Dany claimed he had been working late on a project for a client and then went to bed early. However, his alibi quickly began to fall apart. When detectives checked with his workplace, they found no record of him being there late. Moreover, Dany's colleagues mentioned that he had left the office at his usual time. During the questioning, Dany remained mostly composed but showed signs of discomfort when asked about his relationship with Suzette. He admitted that they had arguments, mainly about his jealousy and her long hours at work. Dany also acknowledged that he was aware of Suzette's close friendship with Ross Cambure, her ex-husband who often helped around the house. However, he denied any involvement in her murder. The detectives pressed further, asking about the belts and nunchucks found at the crime scene. Dany hesitated but eventually admitted that the belts were his. He said he used them for his martial arts hobby, but insisted he had never used them to hurt Suzette. His answers were evasive, and his calm demeanor began to crack, revealing glimpses of anger and frustration. Detectives Coralie and Lara noticed these changes in his behavior. They believed that Dany's meticulous and controlling nature could have driven him to commit the crime, especially if he felt threatened by Suzette's independence or her relationship with Ross. As the interrogation continued, Dany's responses grew more erratic. He alternated between calm denials and angry outbursts, raising the detective's suspicions further. The interview ended with Dany still professing his innocence, but the inconsistencies in his story and his emotional volatility painted a different picture. The investigation into Dany Anaki was just beginning. Detectives Coralie and Lara knew they needed more evidence to connect him to Suzette's murder. But with each question, Dany became a more likely suspect in the eyes of the police. The next suspect in Suzette Anaki's murder was Ross Cambure, her 37-year-old ex-husband. Ross was disciplined, energetic, and known for his supportive nature. He worked as a fitness trainer at a local gym, a job that suited his active lifestyle. He had known Suzette since college, and their friendship remained strong over the years despite their divorce 8 years before. Ross was frequently seen at the Anaki home, helping with the garden and house repairs. On the morning of September 15, 2002, detectives Mark Coralie and Susan Lara brought Ross in for questioning. The police station was filled with reporters, all eager for updates on the case. Ross appeared cooperative but visibly nervous as he sat down with the detectives. Detective Coralie began the interrogation by asking Ross about his relationship with Suzette and Dany. Ross admitted that he was still very close to Suzette and considered her one of his best friends. He also acknowledged his friendship with Dany, but noted that their relationship had become strained over time. As the questioning continued, Ross dropped a bombshell. He revealed that he had been secretly having sex with both Dany and Suzette, unbeknownst to each other. This revelation shocked the detectives, adding a new layer of complexity to the case. Ross explained that the relationships had been going on for several months, and he felt deeply conflicted about them. Detective Lara asked Ross if he had any knowledge of the belts and nunchucks found at the crime scene.
Ross shook his head and insisted he had never seen Dany use them for anything other than martial arts practice. He also stated that he had no idea about any abuse in the Anaki household. Ross's demeanor was a mix of nervousness and cooperation. He answered the detective's questions honestly but seemed deeply troubled by the situation. He explained that on the night of Suzette's murder, he had been at home, alone, watching Jimmy Neutron and Rugrats. Unfortunately, he had no one to corroborate his alibi. The detectives found Ross's confession about the secret relationships to be both surprising and suspicious. It gave Ross a potential motive. If Suzette or Dany had discovered the affairs, it could have led to a violent confrontation. However, Ross's genuine sadness and shock over Suzette's death made it hard to believe he could commit such a brutal crime. As the interrogation ended, Ross was released but remained a person of interest. Detectives Coralie and Lara knew they needed to dig deeper into Ross's background and alibi to determine if he had any involvement in Suzette's murder. The investigation was becoming more complex, with each suspect revealing new and startling information. On September 17, 2002, 3 days after Suzette Anaki's murder, the investigation took a crucial turn. The day was clear and sunny, providing a stark contrast to the grim task at hand. Detective Mark Coralie received a call from a neighbor who had found something unusual in her backyard while gardening. She had unearthed a blood-stained shirt buried in the dirt. Detectives Coralie and Susan Lara rushed to the scene to collect the evidence. The neighbor handed over the shirt, immense size, and it appeared to have been hastily buried. They carefully placed it in an evidence bag, knowing it could be a key piece in solving the case. Back at the police station, the shirt was sent to the forensic lab for analysis. Meanwhile, Coralie and Lara reviewed the case files and the alibis of their suspects. The new evidence could potentially break the case wide open. The forensic team worked quickly to analyze the shirt. By late afternoon, they had found DNA that matched Dany Anaki. This finding was significant and placed Dany at the crime scene, providing physical evidence linking him to the murder. With this new evidence in hand, the detectives dug deeper into Dany's background. They discovered a disturbing pattern of abuse. Suzette had been brutally abused by Dany. He frequently beat her with belts, one in each hand, in what he called cowboy style. He also used a pair of nunchucks for what he referred to as a ninja beating. These findings painted a horrifying picture of Suzette's life and suggested a motive driven by Dany's violent tendencies and control issues. The third suspect in the investigation was Lana Anaki, Suzette's 18-year-old daughter. Luna was a charismatic and ambitious college student at Oklahoma State University, known for her social skills and persuasive nature. She had a magnetic personality and was popular among her peers. However, Luna had been hiding a significant secret. She was pregnant with her stepfather Dany's child. On September 18, 2002, detectives Mark Coralie and Susan Lara brought Luna in for questioning at the Broken Arrow Police Department. Luna appeared calm but apprehensive as she sat down with the detectives. Detective Coralie began by asking Luna about her relationship with her mother and stepfather. Luna spoke fondly of her mother, describing her as a loving and adventurous person. When asked about Dany, Luna hesitated before revealing the shocking details of their affair. She admitted that the relationship had been ongoing for several years and that she was pregnant with this child. The detectives were stunned by Luna's confession. They questioned her about her whereabouts on the night of the murder. Luna claimed she had been out with friends, celebrating a successful exam. However, her friends' statements were inconsistent, and some couldn't confirm seeing her that night. Detective Lara asked Luna if she had any knowledge of the belts and nunchucks found at the crime scene. Luna's eyes widened, and she appeared genuinely shocked. She denied any involvement in her mother's murder and insisted that she loved Suzette deeply. Despite her calm demeanor, the detectives noticed signs of stress and fear. Luna's potential motive was complex. If Suzette had discovered the affair and the pregnancy, it could have led to a confrontation. However, Luna's genuine grief over her mother's death made it difficult to believe she was involved. The detectives decided to dig deeper into Luna's background and relationships. As the interrogation continued, Luna maintained her innocence but admitted that her relationship with Dany was a mistake. She expressed remorse for the pain it had caused and seemed genuinely devastated by her mother's death. Despite Luna's emotional responses, the detectives knew they had to consider all possibilities. They reviewed her alibi and questioned her friends again, looking for any inconsistencies. Luna's complex relationship with Dany and her secret pregnancy added layers to the investigation. making it one of the most challenging aspects of the case. Luna's interview ended with more questions than answers. The detectives knew they needed concrete evidence to determine her involvement, if any, in Suzette's murder. The investigation was far from over, and every new piece of information brought them closer to the truth. With the discovery of the blood-stained shirt and the pattern of abuse, the Broken Arrow Police Department felt confident they had identified Suzette Anaki's murderer. On September 18, 2002, detectives Mark Corley and Susan Alera pieced together the evidence pointing to Dany Anaki as the killer. The weather was clear, mirroring the clarity with which the case had come into focus. Dany Anaki, a 48-year-old accountant, had shown signs of jealousy and violent tendencies. Investigators learned that Dany had been abusing Suzette for years. He would beat her with belts, one in each hand, a method he called cowboy style. He also used nunchucks, referring to this brutal practice as ninja beating. This abuse, combined with his desire to be with his stepdaughter Luna, who was also pregnant with his child, motivated him to commit the murder. Dany believed that killing Suzette would allow him to start a new life with Luna without the complications of a divorce. Additionally, he stood to gain financially from Suzette's life insurance policy. On the night of September 14, 2002, under the guise of another abusive episode, Dany whipped Suzette to death cowboy style with his belts in their large suburban home. Detectives Corley and Alera gathered all the evidence, including witness testimonies and forensic analysis, and presented their case to the district attorney. The decision was made to arrest Dany for Suzette's murder. On the morning of September 18, the police planned the arrest. Under a clear sky, they approached Dany's office, knowing that apprehending him in public would prevent any potential escape or harm to others. Dany was taken into custody without incident. He appeared shocked and tried to maintain his innocence, but the overwhelming evidence against him made his guilt apparent. Suzette's family, particularly her daughter Luna, had mixed reactions. Luna was torn between the loss of her mother and the arrest of her stepfather and secret lover. Friends and neighbors expressed relief that the alleged perpetrator was in custody, hoping for justice for Suzette. The arrest marked a significant step towards closure for Suzette's family and friends. Detective Corley and Detective Alera, who had worked tirelessly on the case, felt a sense of accomplishment, but knew the journey was far from over. The trial would be the next hurdle in bringing full justice to Suzette Anaki's tragic end. The trial of Dany Anaki began in late September 2002, capturing the attention of the Broken Arrow community and the media. The prosecution was led by District Attorney James D. Capria, a 45-year-old known for his sharp mind and dedication to justice. He presented the case with determination, focusing on the evidence that painted Dany as a violent and controlling husband who murdered his wife, Suzette, to be with his stepdaughter Luna and benefit from a life insurance policy. Capria outlined the abuse Suzette had endured, including the horrific cowboy style and ninja beating methods Dany used. He detailed the events of the night of September 14, emphasizing the bloodstained shirt and the DNA evidence linking Dany to the crime scene. Capria called witnesses, including neighbors and forensic experts, who testified about the abuse and the evidence. The defense attorney, Robert Angel Corley, a 50-year-old with a calm demeanor and years of experience in criminal defense, argued that the evidence was circumstantial and that Dany was a loving husband who was being unfairly targeted. Corley suggested that the real killer could have been someone else, possibly Ross Cambure or even Luna. He questioned the reliability of the witness testimonies and the forensic evidence, trying to cast doubt in the minds of the jurors. Throughout the trial, Suzette's family watched with heavy hearts. Luna, torn between the loss of her mother and the arrest of her stepfather and lover, appeared visibly distressed. Friends and neighbors who had known Suzette as a vibrant and loyal person were there to support the family, hoping for justice. After several days of testimonies and arguments, the jury deliberated. On October 3, 2002, they returned with a verdict. Dany Anaki was found guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom was silent as the judge pronounced the sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole. The severity of the punishment reflected the brutality of the crime and the betrayal of trust. Dany showed little emotion as the sentence was read, maintaining his innocence. Suzette's family, while relieved that justice had been served, was also grappling with the emotional toll of the trial and the loss of Suzette. Luna was particularly affected, struggling with her complicated feelings about Dany and the devastating impact on her life. The trial's conclusion brought a sense of closure to the community, but the scars of Suzette's tragic death would remain. Friends and family members tried to move forward, remembering Suzette for the loving and adventurous person she was. After the trial of Dany Anaki, the residents of Broken Arrow tried to return to their normal lives, but the memory of Suzette Anaki's tragic death lingered. The verdict had brought a sense of justice, but the community was still healing from the shock. Dany was sent to a maximum security prison to serve his life sentence without the possibility of parole. He continued to claim his innocence, but his appeals were repeatedly denied. In prison, Dany was a model inmate, but he remained isolated and alone, reflecting on the choices that led him to this point. Luna Anaki faced a difficult path ahead. She decided to leave Oklahoma State University for a semester to take care of her mental health. The revelation of her affair with Dany and her pregnancy had left her feeling lost and overwhelmed. Luna sought therapy to help her process the trauma and rebuild her life. She moved in with her maternal grandparents, who offered her support and a safe place to grieve and heal as she raised her daughter, Yacht, as a single mother. Ross Cambure, who had been caught in the web of the investigation due to his secret relationships with both Suzette and Dany, returned to his job as a fitness trainer. The experience had changed him profoundly, and he became more private and introspective. Ross focused on his work and avoided the spotlight, hoping to leave the past behind. Suzette's parents, devastated by the loss of their daughter, focused on supporting Luna and preserving Suzette's legacy. They created a scholarship fund in Suzette's name at the local high school, aiming to help young women pursue their dreams. The town of Broken Arrow, though scared by the tragic events, found ways to heal and remember. Suzette Anaki's story was a reminder of the complexities of human relationships and the need for kindness and understanding. Life slowly moved forward, but Suzette's vibrant spirit continued to inspire those who knew her. Jesse Harris was a 45-year-old man who lived in Albany, New York. He worked as an employee for the New York State government. Jesse was known for his friendly personality and his strong dedication to his family. People at work liked him because he was dependable and hardworking. He often helped others and was very active in his community. Jesse's life was not without its challenges. He was blind, having lost his sight in his early 20s due to retinitis pigmentosa, a genetic disorder that affects the retina. Despite this, Jesse never let his blindness hold him back. He learned to navigate the world with the help of a cane and was highly independent. He yearned to be an example to others that a disability should not hold you back. Jesse lived with his wife, Jessica Turner Harris. They had been married for over 15 years. Jessica was a successful wedding planner who often organized community events. They had one son, Pikachu, aged 10, and were going through IVF to have another. Jesse loved spending time with his family. He often took them to Washington Park and the Albany Pine Bush Preserve for picnics and nature walks. In the days before his death, Jesse was excited about a new project at work. He had just received a promotion and was looking forward to starting his new role. He was also planning a family vacation to Disney World in Florida. Jesse had bought new luggage from Macy's and was talking about the trip with his family. He loved spending time with his son and wanted to create lasting memories with them. In October 2014, Jesse's life seemed perfect. He had a loving family, a successful career, and plans for an exciting future. But behind the happy facade, trouble was brewing. Jesse was unaware of the dark secrets and hidden tensions that would soon turn his world upside down. His life, filled with hope and dreams, would be tragically cut short in a violent and shocking way. On October 14, 2014, it was a chilly Tuesday morning in Albany, New York. At around 8:30 a.m., Kevin Brown, a co-worker of Jesse Harris, arrived at the New York State office building. Kevin had come in early to discuss a project with Jesse. They had been working together on a new initiative for the state government. Kevin noticed that Jesse's office door was slightly open, which was unusual for him. Kevin knocked on the door but got no response. Feeling uneasy, he pushed the door open and was immediately struck by a gruesome sight. Jesse was lying on the floor, surrounded by a pool of blood. His body was covered with stab wounds, and his eyes were gouged out. A bloody letter opener was lying next to him. The scene was horrifying and grotesque, unlike anything Kevin had ever seen. Kevin felt a wave of panic and fear. His hands trembled as he reached for his phone to call 911. His voice was shaky as he explained to the operator what he had found. Kevin was scared and could barely believe what he was seeing. He knew he had to stay calm and give the police all the information they needed. Within minutes, the Albany Police Department arrived at the scene. The first officers to arrive quickly secured the area and called for backup. Kevin, still in shock, sat down in a nearby chair as the officers began their investigation. He tried to answer their questions as best as he could, but his mind was racing. He couldn't understand who would do such a terrible thing to JC, who was well liked by everyone. News of the murder quickly spread through the office and the local community. People were shocked and saddened by the loss of JC, a man who had touched many lives with his kindness and dedication. The Albany Times-Union reported on the murder, and the story was also covered by local TV stations. JC's death left a deep impact on everyone who knew him. The violent and sudden nature of his murder shook the community, and people began to wonder who could have committed such a horrible crime. On October 14, 2014, the Albany Police Department responded quickly to the 911 call about J.C. Harrison murder. Patrol officers were the first to arrive at the New York State Office building where J.C.'s body was found. They secured the area to ensure no evidence would be disturbed. They called for backup immediately. Detective Natalie Lawson and Detective Paul Johnson arrived soon after. Detective Lawson was known for her careful and detailed approach to investigations, while Detective Johnson was recognized for his sharp intuition and ability to read crime scenes. As they entered JC's office, they were met with a horrific sight. Blood was everywhere, on the floor, walls, and even the desk. Papers were scattered across the room, and the letter opener, the murder weapon, lay nearby, covered in blood. The brutality of the crime was shocking. Detective Lawson began to photograph the scene, while Detective Johnson examined the body. JC had been stabbed multiple times, and his eyes had been gouged out, indicating a crime of intense anger and betrayal. They knew this was not a random act of violence, but a targeted attack. The detectives collected evidence meticulously. They took samples of the blood, fingerprints from the door and desk, and gathered any other physical evidence that might help identify the murderer. They also collected JC's phone and computer to look for any clues about his recent activities and contacts. Forensic experts arrived to assist with the investigation. They used tools like luminol to detect any hidden bloodstains and special cameras to capture detailed images of the crime scene. The experts also examined the letter opener for any traces of DNA or fingerprints that could lead to the killer. As the investigation continued, Detective Lawson and Detective Johnson interviewed Kevin Brown, who had discovered the body. Kevin was still in shock but tried his best to provide any useful information. He described JC as a well-liked and respected colleague with no known enemies at work. The detectives also spoke to JC's other coworkers and friends. They learned about his recent promotion and his plans for a family vacation. Everyone described JC as a kind and dedicated person, making the crime even more puzzling. Detective Lawson and Detective Johnson knew they had to act fast. They needed to find out who had the motive and opportunity to kill JC. The pressure was on to solve the case and bring justice to JC and his grieving family. The gruesome crime scene provided many clues, but it would take careful analysis and keen investigative skills to uncover the truth behind the violent murder. Jessica Turner Harris, JC's wife, was the first suspect in the investigation. Jessica, 43, was a well-known wedding planner in Albany. She was successful and often organized big community events. Jessica was known for her sociable nature and friendly personality. However, despite their seemingly happy marriage, Jessica had doubts about JC's fidelity. Jessica had been aware of rumors about JC's possible affair. She had noticed changes in his behavior and had grown suspicious over time. Jessica loved her family deeply but couldn't shake off the feeling that something was wrong. This led the police to consider her as a possible suspect. Detectives Natalie Lawson and Paul Johnson brought Jessica in for questioning. She appeared calm but clearly distressed about her husband's brutal murder. The detectives asked her about her relationship with JC and if she had noticed any changes in his behavior recently. Jessica admitted she had suspicions about JC having an affair but denied any involvement in his death. Jessica explained that on the night of the murder, she was at home with their son Pikachu. She provided details about their evening, saying they had dinner together and watched the movie Eyes Wide Shut before going to bed. The detectives checked her alibi by speaking with her son and looking at phone records. Everything seemed to match her story. Despite her calm demeanor, Jessica's emotions were evident. She was grieving the loss of her husband and struggling to understand why someone would kill him so brutally. The detectives noted her emotional state and continued to probe for more information. As part of the investigation, the police searched Jessica's belongings and found no evidence linking her directly to the crime. They also reviewed her financial records and found nothing suspicious. Jessica's friends and colleagues described her as a loving wife and mother, further supporting her innocence. However, the detectives couldn't ignore the fact that Jessica knew about JC's possible affair. They wondered if this knowledge could have driven her to commit the crime. They questioned her about her feelings toward JC and if she ever confronted him about the rumors. Jessica admitted she had confronted him once, but JC had denied everything. Jessica's cooperation with the investigation and lack of concrete evidence against her led the detectives to look at other suspects. While she remained a person of interest, the focus shifted to other individuals who might have had a motive to kill JC. The police were determined to find the truth. Jessica's story added another layer to the complex case, but without solid evidence, the detectives knew they had to keep looking for the real murderer. The investigation was far from over, and the detectives continued to search for answers. The second suspect in the investigation was Megan Turner, Jessica's younger sister. Megan, 28, was a freelance graphic designer living in Albany. She was outgoing and ambitious, often described as a person who sought validation and affection from older men. Megan was also known by another name, Dulcimer Geisha, her stage name as an exotic dancer at a local club. This part of her life was not widely known to her family and friends. Megan had a history of minor criminal behavior, including a few shoplifting incidents and a DUI from her early 20s. Her past raised red flags for the detectives, who wondered if her lifestyle could be connected to JC's murder. Megan often spent overnight stays at Jessica and JC's house, ostensibly to help Jessica design specialized website for her couples, but it became clear she had a closer relationship with JC than previously thought. Detectives Natalie Lawson and Paul Johnson brought Megan in for questioning. She seemed nervous but cooperative. The detectives asked her about her relationship with JC and her activities on the night of the murder. Megan admitted she was close to JC and often confided in him. She claimed she was at home alone on the night of the murder, working on a graphic design project for a local business. Megan's alibi was shaky, as she had no one to corroborate her story. The detectives probed deeper, asking about her work as Dulcimer Geisha and her criminal past. Megan became defensive but maintained her innocence. She insisted that she had nothing to do with JC's death and that their relationship was purely platonic. The detectives found evidence that Megan had been at JC's office the day before the murder, supposedly discussing a project with him behind closed doors. They also discovered text messages, described as flirty, between Megan and JC that suggested a more intimate relationship. The messages showed Megan expressing feelings of sexual attraction toward JC, who seemed to be trying to distance himself from her. Despite the evidence pointing to a possible motive, Megan continued to deny any involvement. She admitted to feeling hurt by JC's attempts to end their relationship, but claimed she would never harm him. The detectives noted her emotional responses and erratic behavior during the interrogation. The police searched Megan's apartment and found items linking her to her stage persona, but nothing directly connecting her to the murder. They continued to gather evidence and interview people who knew Megan, including colleagues at the graphic design firm and the club where she performed. As the investigation progressed, Megan remained a key suspect due to her close relationship with JC, her criminal past, and her emotional instability. However, without concrete evidence, the detectives knew they needed to keep digging. The truth behind JC's murder was still elusive, and the investigation was far from over. The third suspect in the investigation was Kevin Brown, a co-worker of JC Harris. Kevin, 40, worked in the same New York State office as JC. He was known to have a short temper and had made several complaints about JC's work style and methods. Kevin had been passed over for a promotion that JC received, causing tension between the two. Even more suspicious, Kevin was the one who discovered JC's body and the person to see him last before he died. Detectives Natalie Lawson and Paul Johnson brought Kevin in for questioning. Kevin, who was tall with a gruff demeanor, seemed defensive from the start. The detectives asked him about his relationship with JC and his feelings about not getting the promotion. Kevin admitted he was frustrated but claimed he had no reason to harm JC. Kevin said that on the night of the murder, he was at home watching a football game between the New York Giants and the Philadelphia Eagles. He provided the names of friends who could confirm his alibi. The detectives checked with Kevin's friends, who confirmed his story. However, the detectives were not convinced and decided to dig deeper. Kevin had a history of workplace conflicts. He had been involved in several arguments with other coworkers and had even received a warning for his behavior. The detectives wondered if his anger toward JC could have escalated to violence. They looked into Kevin's past and found a history of minor offenses, including a bar fight from a few years ago. The police searched Kevin's apartment for any evidence that might link him to the murder. They found several knives, but none matched the letter opener used in the crime. They also examined his computer and phone records. Kevin had sent a few angry emails to JC in the past, but nothing that indicated a direct threat. During the interrogation, Kevin's responses were terse and defensive. He denied any involvement in JC's murder and insisted he had moved on from the promotion incident. The detectives noted his body language and tone, looking for any signs of deception. Kevin's frustration was evident, but there was no solid evidence to connect him to the crime. The detectives continued to monitor Kevin's activities and interviewed his coworkers. They found mixed opinions about him. Some described him as hardworking but temperamental, while others saw him as a potential threat due to his frequent outbursts. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, Kevin remained a person of interest in the case, but detectives knew they had to keep exploring all angles. They needed more than just suspicions to prove his involvement. As the investigation progressed, Kevin's role in JC's life and death continued to be a focal point. On October 18, 2014, 4 days after J.C. Harris' murder, the Albany Police Department received a crucial piece of new evidence. It was a chilly, overcast morning when a maintenance worker named Peter Willis found a blood-stained glove in a trash can behind a New York State office building where J.C. worked. Peter immediately reported his discovery to the police. Detectives Natalie Lawson and Paul Johnson quickly arrived at the scene. They carefully collected the glove and sent it to the forensic lab for analysis. The detectives hoped this new evidence would provide the breakthrough they needed. Later that afternoon, the forensic team, led by Dr. Amelia Cheonyang, began examining the glove. She and her team found traces of JC's blood on the glove. Along with DNA that did not belong to JC, this new DNA sample was crucial as it could potentially identify the murderer. Meanwhile, the detectives revisited the crime scene to search for any other overlooked evidence. They examined the office and surrounding areas with a fresh perspective. Using advanced forensic tools like luminol, they discovered faint blood traces leading from JC's office to the back exit of the building. This suggested that the murderer had left through that door, possibly discarding the glove along the way. The police then reviewed security footage from nearby cameras. They focused on the back exit, hoping to identify anyone who might have used it around the time of the murder. After hours of watching the footage, they spotted a shadowy figure leaving the building late at night, wearing a hoodie and gloves. Although the footage was grainy, it provided a possible lead. Back at the lab, Dr. Cheonyang compared the DNA from the glove to the samples they had from the suspects. The results came back quickly, matching Megan Turner's DNA. This was a significant breakthrough. Megan had already been a key suspect due to her close relationship with JC and her emotional instability. Detectives Lawson and Johnson decided to bring Megan in for further questioning. They confronted her with the new evidence. Megan initially denied any involvement, but as the detectives presented the DNA match, her composure began to crack. She admitted to being at the office that night but claimed she had no memory of committing the murder. Her erratic behavior and conflicting statements made the detectives even more suspicious. The new evidence shifted the focus of the investigation sharply toward Megan. The glove, the DNA match, and her proximity to JC on the night of the murder all pointed to her involvement. The detectives knew they were getting closer to solving the case, but they needed more information to secure a conviction. With the new evidence in hand, the police intensified their investigation. Determined to uncover the full truth behind J.C. Harris's tragic death, the community awaited answers as the detectives worked tirelessly to piece together the final parts of the puzzle. On October 22, 2014, Albany police made a significant breakthrough in the murder case of J.C. Harris. Megan Turner, 28, was officially identified as the murderer. The arrest followed crucial evidence linking Megan to the crime, including a DNA match from a blood-stained glove found near the scene. Megan was a freelance graphic designer and also worked as an exotic dancer under the name Dulcimer Disha. The twist in the case came when police discovered that Jessica Turner Harris, JC's wife, had actually known about the affair between Megan and JC for months. Jessica, who always had an intense sibling rivalry with her sister, had been secretly blackmailing Megan to keep the relationship going. Jessica's aim was to gather enough evidence to ruin Megan's reputation and career. This manipulation added a shocking layer to the crime. Detectives Natalie Lawson and Paul Johnson, who had been leading the investigation, received the tip from Jessica and Megan's widowed father about Jessica's involvement. They learned that Jessica, who had always been jealous of Megan's good looks, had been using her knowledge of the affair to coerce Megan into keeping the relationship alive. This revelation was confirmed by Jessica's text messages and emails, which showed she was actively blackmailing Megan with sexually explicit pictures of her and JC. On the day of Megan's arrest, the weather in Albany was cool and overcast. Detectives Lawson and Johnson arrived at Megan's apartment, which was located in a modest area near Washington Park. Megan was at home, preparing for her evening shift at the club where she performed as Dulcimer Disha. When the police approached, Megan seemed shocked but cooperative. She was taken into custody without resistance. The arrest was widely covered by local media, including the Albany Times-Union and WNYT News Channel 13. The media reported the new twist in the case, including Jessica's role in manipulating Megan. During the interrogation, Megan admitted to killing JC in a fit of rage after he tried to end their affair. She revealed how Jessica's blackmail and manipulation had driven her to a breaking point. Megan described the murder in detail, including how she used a letter opener to stab JC multiple times and left his body in a grotesque display. Megan's confession and the new evidence provided a clear motive and detailed the tragic culmination of manipulation, obsession, and betrayal. The police were able to piece together the full story, showing how Jessica's indirect influence had pushed Megan to commit the crime. Megan Turner was charged with first-degree murder. The arrest and the unraveling of the twisted motivations behind the crime brought a new level of understanding to the case. The investigation revealed a complex web of deceit that had led to J.C. Harris's tragic death. The community and media followed the case closely as the search for justice continued. Megan Turner's trial began on December 1, 2014, at the Albany County Courthouse. The courtroom was packed with reporters and spectators eager to follow the high-profile case. Megan, 28, faced charges of first-degree murder for the killing of J.C. Harris, a case that had captured local attention. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Becca Cole, known for her clear and compelling arguments. Cole presented a strong case against Megan, using evidence like Megan's confession, the DNA from the blood-stained glove, and Jessica Turner Harris's blackmail. Cole argued that Megan's actions were driven by obsession and manipulation. She detailed how Jessica had used her knowledge of the affair to coerce Megan, adding a layer of manipulation to the crime. During the trial, Cole highlighted the severity of the crime. She described how Megan had brutally attacked JC with a letter opener, leaving his body in a grotesque display. The prosecution emphasized that Megan's violent reaction was a direct result of the emotional manipulation and stress caused by Jessica. Megan's defense attorney, Juan Carter, 50, was known for his calm and methodical approach. Carter argued that Megan had acted out of intense emotional distress rather than premeditation. He suggested that Megan's mental state, combined with the pressure from Jessica's blackmail, had led her to commit the murder in a moment of rage. Carter claimed that Megan did not intend to kill JC, but her actions were the result of extreme emotional turmoil. Throughout the trial, Megan's family remained in the courtroom, visibly distressed. They hoped for a fair outcome, but were deeply troubled by the evidence and the serious nature of the charges. JC's family, including his wife Jessica, attended the trial to seek justice and to understand the full extent of the tragedy. The jury deliberated for several hours and returned a verdict on December 9, 2014. Megan Turner was found guilty of first-degree murder. The jury's decision was based on the evidence presented, including the confession, DNA match, and the emotional impact of the blackmail on Megan. On December 15, 2014, Megan was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge's decision was met with mixed reactions. Some felt the sentence was justified given the brutality of the crime, while others believed it was a harsh punishment. JC's family and friends felt a sense of closure with the verdict. They could begin to heal from the loss of JC, knowing that justice had been served. The trial had shed light on a tragic story of obsession and manipulation, emphasizing the far-reaching effects of deceit and betrayal. The case was a reminder of the importance of justice and the impact of emotional and psychological manipulation. After Megan Turner's sentencing on December 15, 2014, the lives of everyone involved in the case changed dramatically. Megan, 28, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder of J.C. Harris. Her trial had been widely covered by local media such as the Albany Times-Union and WNYK News Channel 13. In prison, Megan faced a difficult adjustment. Known for her secretive and troubled past, she struggled with the reality of her life sentence. Her family, who had been supportive throughout the trial, found it hard to cope with the outcome. They visited her occasionally but were deeply affected by the nature of her crime. Jessica Turner Harris, JC's wife, continued to deal with the fallout from the case. The revelation of her blackmailing Megan had caused a scandal. Jessica faced public scrutiny and criticism for her role in manipulating Megan. Despite her actions being a significant factor in the case, Jessica remained focused on her family and her work as a wedding planner. She tried to rebuild her life and restore some sense of normalcy for her son, Pikachu. Overall, the murder of J.C. Harris and Megan Turner's subsequent arrest and trial had far-reaching effects on everyone involved. The case highlighted the tragic consequences of betrayal and manipulation, underscoring the importance of addressing mental health and emotional issues. The community, while moving forward, would always remember the case that shocked Albany and the profound impact it had on their lives. Today, we're exploring a chilling tale from America's largest retirement community, where a young woman's life would be cut tragically short by her sugar daddy's twisted obsession. Emily Harrington was a 22-year-old elementary school teacher in Sumter County, Florida, where she taught at a small school. Emily was a kind and caring person, always going the extra mile for her students. Her classroom was filled with bright posters and educational toys, and she often stayed late, grading papers and preparing lessons. She was passionate about helping kids learn and wanted to make a difference in their lives. Despite her dedication, Emily struggled with the extraordinarily low salary of just $19,000 a year. It was tough to live on that income, especially with the rising cost of living. Rent, groceries, and even gas prices were high, and Emily found it hard to make ends meet. She dreamed of doing more for her students and herself, but the financial stress was overwhelming. To supplement her income, Emily turned to a sugar daddy arrangement. She sought out older, wealthy men who would provide her with financial support in exchange for companionship. This led her to the Villages, America's largest retirement community and a haven of sexual free expression, where she met Hal Davenport, a 68-year-old retired businessman. Hal was generous, often buying Emily expensive gifts and taking her out to nice restaurants. Emily saw this as a way to support herself while still pursuing her passion for teaching. Emily had a close relationship with her father, Robert Harrington, especially after her mother passed away. Robert was proud of his daughter and her accomplishments, but he worried about her living situation and the pressures she faced. He knew she was struggling but didn't know the full extent of it. Emily didn't share her sugar daddy arrangement with him, keeping it a secret to avoid upsetting him. In March 2022, Emily was focused on her work and future. She was preparing for the next school year and planning to attend a conference in Orlando to learn more about engaging her students in science. Emily dreamed of becoming a well-known educator, inspiring other teachers and students. But behind her positive outlook, she was dealing with the complexities of her sugar daddy arrangement, a secret that would soon have tragic consequences. On the morning of March 12, 2022, just before 7:30 a.m., Jasper Rivera, a maintenance worker at the U-Haul storage facility on County Road 466, just outside the Villages, Florida, started his routine checks. The sun had just risen, casting a pale light over the rows of orange and white storage units. As Jasper made his way down the aisles, he noticed something unusual near one of the storage units, a pile of what looked like discarded clothing. Curious, Jasper walked closer, but what he saw made him freeze in his tracks. It wasn't just a pile of clothes. It was a young woman's body, partially dressed and lying on the cold, rough ground. Her face was turned away, and she wasn't moving. Jasper's heart raced as he realized the seriousness of what he had found. He quickly pulled out his smartphone, his hands shaking, and dialed 911. When the operator answered, Jasper struggled to find the words to describe what he had just seen. "I found a body," he finally managed to say, his voice unsteady. The operator calmly asked him to stay on the line and provide details about the location while dispatching emergency services to the scene. Jasper followed her instructions, trying to stay calm, but the shock of what he had discovered was overwhelming. Within minutes, police officers from the Sumter County Sheriff's Office arrived at the U-Haul facility. By this time, a few early morning customers had arrived, some noticing the flashing lights of the patrol cars. The officers quickly cordoned off the area around the body with yellow crime scene tape, instructing curious onlookers to stay back. The victim was later identified as 22-year-old Emily Harrington, an elementary school teacher. Her body showed signs of blunt force trauma to the head, and there were dragged Devons on the ground, suggesting she had been moved to this location after her death. Emily was found wearing only her underwear, which raised immediate concerns about the circumstances leading to her death. Police noted the lack of blood at the scene, confirming the suspicion that Emily had been killed elsewhere. Jasper Rivera remained on the scene, visibly shaken but cooperative. He spoke to the officers about his discovery, still trying to process what he had found. The tragic scene marked the beginning of a complex and troubling investigation into Emily Harrington's untimely death. On March 12, 2022, shortly after the discovery of Emily Harrington's body at the U-Haul storage facility on County Road 466, the Sumter County Sheriff's Office launched a full-scale investigation. Detective Ashley Collins, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for solving difficult cases, arrived on the scene with her partner, Officer Devin Stevens. The two were known for their efficient teamwork, often handling complex cases in the rapidly growing community of the Villages. The scene at the U-Haul facility was grim. Emily's body lay on the ground, partially clothed, with clear signs of blunt force trauma to her head. The area was eerily quiet, with only the hum of early morning traffic in the distance. The police quickly cordoned off the area with yellow crime scene tape, keeping curious onlookers and reporters at bay. Detective Collins carefully examined the body, noting that there was no blood on the ground, confirming that Emily had likely been killed elsewhere, and then moved. Nearby security cameras were the first items on the detective's checklist. They'd hoped to catch a glimpse of who had brought Emily to this isolated location. Detective Collins directed Officer Stevens to collect the footage from the facility's office, which was equipped with several cameras covering the entrance and the rows of storage units. They would later review the footage at the station, looking for any suspicious vehicles or people who had been near the scene around the time of the murder. As they continued their investigation, the detectives noticed dragged Devons on the gravel near Emily's body, indicating that she had been pulled from a vehicle and left at the site. This was a crucial piece of evidence that suggested a deliberate attempt to hide the body, possibly to delay its discovery. Detective Collins instructed the forensic team to take detailed photos of the Devons and collect any fibers or debris that might have come from the suspect's clothing or vehicle. The forensic team, led by Dr. Grace Kwok, arrived shortly after to process the scene. They used advanced tools such as Luno to search for any hidden blood traces, even though the scene appeared clean. The lack of visible blood confirmed the detectives' theory that Emily had been killed elsewhere, making it crucial to identify where the initial crime took place. As the team worked, Detective Collins interviewed Jasper Rivera, the maintenance worker who had found the body. Jasper was still visibly shaken, but provided a clear and detailed account of his discovery. He described how he initially thought the body was just a pile of clothes until he got closer. His account helped the detectives establish a timeline and narrowed down when the body had been left at the facility. The investigation at the crime scene was methodical and thorough, but it left the detectives with more questions than answers. They knew the key to solving Emily's murder lay in finding out where she had been killed and who had the motive to enter like so vilo. The first person of interest in the investigation was Harold Hal Davenport, a 68-year-old widower and retired businessman living in the Villages. Hal was well known in the community for his wealth and charm. Originally from Zanesville, Ohio, he had built a successful career in real estate and enjoyed a comfortable retirement in Florida's largest retirement community. Hal and Emily Harrington had met through an online arrangement where Emily sought financial support from older, wealthy men. That relationship began with Hal providing Emily with money and gifts in exchange for sex and companionship. Over time, Hal became increasingly attached to Emily, viewing her as more than just a sugar daughter. His attachment soon turned into possessiveness, a trait that had caused problems in his past relationships. When police first interviewed Hal on March 13, 2022, a day after Emily's body was found, he appeared cooperative but nervous. Hal acknowledged his relationship with Emily, admitting he had last seen her 2 days before her death. He claimed they had spent the evening together at his home, where they watched old movies on Turner Classic Movies and had dinner from Outback Steakhouse, a favorite of Hal's. He insisted their relationship was strictly consensual and that he had no reason to harm her. Despite his initial calm demeanor, detectives noticed inconsistencies in Hal's story. When asked about his whereabouts on the night of Emily's death, Hal hesitated, stumbling over his words. He eventually provided an alibi stating he had been home alone, but the detectives found it suspicious that he couldn't provide any witnesses or details to back up his claim. His nervousness grew as the questioning continued, and he began to show signs of agitation, raising his voice when pressed about the nature of his relationship with Emily. The detectives also learned that Hal had a history of controlling behavior. His past relationships had ended badly, often due to his possessiveness. Police also discovered how his wife in Ohio supposedly committed suicide by driving her car into a lake just days after asking for a divorce. This information painted a picture of a man who could potentially act out of jealousy or fear of losing control. As the investigation progressed, Hal's name remained at the top of the suspect list. The police focused on gathering evidence that could either confirm or disprove his involvement in Emily's death. They obtained a warrant to search Hal's home, looking for any signs that he might have been involved in the crime. A search for traces of blood, any of Emily's belongings, or anything that might link Hal to the murder. Hal Davenport's initial calm demeanor began to crack under the pressure of the investigation, but the detectives knew they needed more than just suspicion to build a solid case against him. The second person of interest in the investigation was Mike Andrews, a 21-year-old part-time server at Applebee's and a community college student in nearby Leesburg. Mike had been dating Emily Harrington for about a year, and although their relationship had its ups and downs, they were generally seen as a happy couple. Mike was outgoing, ambitious, and well-liked by his peers, often dreaming of transferring to a 4-year university to study business. Despite his youthful energy, Mike was also deeply protective of Emily, though he had no idea about her involvement with Hal Davenport, her sugar daddy. On March 14, 2022, 2 days after Emily's body was discovered, the police brought Mike in for questioning. When the detectives asked him about his relationship with Emily, Mike described her as caring, smart, and always supportive of his goals. He said they had been planning a weekend getaway to Orlando, where they hoped to visit Universal Studios. He seemed genuinely shocked when he learned of Emily's death, his voice trembling as he asked the detectives how something so terrible could have happened. However, when detectives asked Mike about Emily's recent behavior, he mentioned something that raised their suspicions. A few weeks before her death, Mike had tested positive for an STD, which he believed he had contracted from Emily. This revelation had caused tension between them, and although they had talked about it, Mike admitted that he was hurt and confused. He had confronted Emily, but she had reassured him that it was likely a misunderstanding, and they had tried to move past it. During the interrogation, Mike's emotions fluctuated between sadness and anger. He was clearly grieving the loss of Emily, but became defensive when the detectives asked if he had any idea about her financial struggles or other relationships. Mike insisted that he knew nothing about Emily's sugar daddy arrangement with Hal Davenport and stated that if he had known, he would have broken up with her. The detectives noted his frustration, but there was no clear evidence linking him to the murder. Mike also provided an alibi for the night of Emily's death, stating that he had been working a late shift at Applebee's, followed by a study session at home. The detectives verified his work schedule, confirming that he had indeed clocked out at 11 p.m. His alibi was further supported by a neighbor who saw him arrive home shortly after midnight. Although Mike had a possible motive due to the tension over the STD, his alibi and emotional response made it difficult for the detectives to pin him as the murderer. They kept him on their radar, but like with Hal Davenport, they knew they needed more concrete evidence before drawing any conclusions. The third person the police turned their attention to was Robert Harrington, Emily's 47-year-old father. Robert was a hard-working man who had raised Emily on his own after his wife passed away when Emily was just a teenager. He was known in the community as a devoted father who was proud of his daughter's accomplishments. However, the recent discovery of a positive pregnancy test in Emily's apartment, along with her sexual involvement with older men, had left him deeply worried and confused. On March 15, 2022, 3 days after Emily's body was found, Robert was brought in for questioning. The detectives knew he had been close to Emily and wanted to understand the nature of their relationship leading up to her death. Robert was visibly distraught during the interview, his eyes red from lack of sleep. He spoke lovingly about Emily, describing her as a bright, kind-hearted young woman who had always been dedicated to her students. He mentioned how she had dreamed of one day starting a family of her own, and how devastated he was that she would never have that chance. When the detectives asked Robert about the pregnancy test they found, he admitted that he had recently discovered it while visiting Emily's apartment. He had been shocked, unsure of how to approach the subject with his daughter. Robert explained that he had tried to reach out to her to discuss it, but Emily had seemed distant, brushing off his concerns. He had no idea who the father might be and was deeply troubled by the thought of Emily having sex with a much older man like Hal Davenport. Despite his clear distress, the detectives pressed Robert about his whereabouts on the night of Emily's death. Robert explained that he had been at home, watching TV and working on a project for his job as an electrician. He lived alone, and without anyone to corroborate his story, the detectives couldn't immediately verify his alibi. They noticed that Robert grew increasingly agitated during the questioning, his hands trembling as he tried to explain his concerns about Emily's recent behavior. Robert's love for his daughter was evident, but the detectives couldn't ignore the possibility that he might have acted out of anger or fear after discovering her secret life. They also considered the possibility that he had been upset about the pregnancy and the idea of Emily being sexually involved with multiple men. However, without concrete evidence, it was difficult to determine if Robert's emotional state had pushed him to commit a crime. The detectives remained cautious, recognizing that Robert's grief was genuine, but they kept him on their list of potential suspects. As with the other individuals they had interviewed, they needed more evidence to either rule him out or confirm their suspicions. On March 18, 2022, 5 days after Emily Harrington's body was found, a significant break in the case emerged. It was a warm afternoon in the Villages, with temperatures hovering around 75 degrees Fahrenheit, when Detective Ashley Collins received a call from the forensic lab. The team had finally analyzed the security footage from the U-Haul storage facility, along with additional evidence collected from the scene. The results revealed something the detectives hadn't anticipated: a partial license plate number from a vehicle that had entered the facility late on the night of March 11. The footage showed a dark-colored sedan pulling into the facility around 11:45 p.m., just hours before Emily's body was discovered. The car's movements were suspicious. It didn't park near any storage units and remained stationary for only a few minutes before quickly exiting the facility. The partial plate number, combined with the vehicle's make and model, a gray 2004 Honda Civic, gave the detectives a crucial lead. Detective Collins and Officer Devin Stevens immediately set to work cross-referencing the information with the Department of Motor Vehicles database. The search led them to an unexpected match: a car registered to Hal Davenport. This discovery added new weight to the growing suspicions around Hal, who had been cooperative yet evasive during his previous interviews. The detectives knew this evidence could be the key to linking Hal directly to the crime. With this new information, the detectives obtained a warrant to search Hal Davenport's home and car. On the morning of March 19, 2022, a team of officers arrived at Hal's residence in the Villages. The search was thorough, with detectives combing through Hal's personal belongings, electronic devices, and the dark-colored sedan parked in his driveway. Inside the car, they found fibers matching the fabric of the clothing Emily was last seen wearing, as well as traces of soil that matched the area near the U-Haul facility. The detectives realized they were closing in on the truth. The combination of the forensic evidence, the security footage, and Hal's erratic behavior pointed to him as the prime suspect. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit together, and the investigation was rapidly approaching its conclusion. On the morning of March 20, 2022, the Sumter County Sheriff's Office made a decisive move. Armed with the evidence they had gathered, Detectives Ashley Collins and Devin Stevens approached Hal Davenport's home in the Villages. It was a quiet Sunday, with many residents enjoying breakfast at local spots like Perkins and Culver's or taking morning strolls along the golf courses. But for Hal, this day would be anything but ordinary. The detectives knocked on Hal's door, their presence signaling the end of the investigation. When Hal opened the door, he looked surprised but not entirely shocked. Over the past few days, the pressure had been mounting, and it seemed he had sensed this moment was coming. Detective Collins informed Hal that they had enough evidence to place him under arrest for the murder of Emily Harrington. Hal's face paled and he slumped into a chair, muttering that it had all been a mistake. He confessed that on the night of March 11, he had gone to confront Emily after misinterpreting the document titled PDFILE Kids on her computer. His severe dyslexia had led him to believe it meant she was abusing children, and in a fit of rage and confusion, he had struck Emily with a heavy object. Hal explained that he had never meant to kill Emily, but when she fell to the floor unconscious, he panicked. In his frantic state, he decided to move her body, hoping to delay its discovery and buy himself some time to figure out what to do next. He had driven to the U-Haul storage facility in the middle of the night, hoping the isolated location would conceal her body long enough for him to come up with a plan. As the detectives placed Hal in handcuffs, his demeanor shifted from one of shock to resignation. He offered no resistance, quietly cooperating as they led him to the patrol car. The neighborhood, known for its laissez-faire sexual atmosphere and retirees, was now buzzing with the news of the arrest. Neighbors watched from their windows, some in disbelief that the kindly old man they knew could be capable of such a crime. Emily's family was notified of the arrest later that day. Her father, Robert Harrington, was devastated but relieved that the person responsible for his daughter's death had been caught. He struggled to comprehend how a man who had seemed so generous and caring could have done something so terrible. The arrest of Hal Davenport marked a critical turning point in the case, bringing a sense of closure to a community shaken by the tragedy. However, it also left lingering questions about the complexities of Hal's mind and the tragic misunderstanding that had led to Emily's death. The trial of Hal Davenport began on April 15, 2022. The Sumter County Courthouse, a modern building located in the heart of the Villages. The courtroom was filled with local residents, many of whom had followed the case closely through news reports on WFTV and other local stations. The atmosphere was tense, with a mix of curiosity and sorrow hanging in the air. The prosecution, led by Assistant State Attorney Laura Reed, argued that Hal Davenport's actions were the result of a reckless and dangerous mindset. Reed, known for her firm but fair approach, laid out the case clearly. She presented evidence showing how Hal's dyslexia had led to a tragic misunderstanding, but emphasized that this did not excuse the violence. Reed described how Hal's confrontation with Emily had escalated into a deadly encounter, leading to her brutal death. She portrayed Emily as a dedicated teacher with a bright future ahead of her, contrasting this with the devastating end she met due to Hal's actions. In response, Hal's defense attorney, Morgan, took a different approach. Morgan, a well-respected defense lawyer known for his skillful arguments, argued that Hal's dyslexia had severely impaired his judgment. He presented evidence showing that Hal had genuinely misinterpreted the document on Emily's computer. According to Morgan, Hal's misreading had led him to believe Emily was involved in something sinister. The defense claimed that Hal's actions were not premeditated, but were instead the result of a momentary lapse in judgment driven by his frustration with his disability. Throughout the trial, Emily's family, including her father Robert Harrington, watched from the courtroom. They were visibly emotional, often seen holding hands or wiping away tears as the details of Emily's final moments were discussed. Their pain was palpable as they listened to the arguments being presented. After several days of testimony and closing arguments, the jury deliberated and reached a verdict on April 21, 2022. They found Hal Davenport guilty of manslaughter. The jury concluded that while Hal had not intended to kill Emily, his reckless actions had directly led to her death. This verdict was seen as a compromise between acknowledging Hal's severe misjudgment and recognizing the lack of premeditation. On April 28, 2022, Hal was sentenced to 36 months in prison. The sentencing drew mixed reactions. Some felt the sentence was too lenient given the grisly nature of the crime, while others believed it was appropriate given Hal's age and his severe dyslexia. Emily's family was disappointed with the outcome, but found some solace in the fact that justice had been served, even if it was not as harsh as they had hoped. The trial's conclusion marked the somber end to a tragic chapter for Emily's loved ones and the community of the Villages. After Hal Davenport was sentenced in April 2022, life slowly began to return to normal in the Villages, Florida. Emily's family faced a long and difficult road to healing. Her father, Robert Harrington, continued to live in the same home he had shared with Emily. The house was filled with memories of her, from photos on the walls to her belongings that still lingered. Robert, deeply affected by his daughter's death, sought counseling to help cope with his grief. He also became involved in local advocacy for victims' families, using his experience to support others going through similar tragedies. Hal Davenport, now serving his 36-month sentence, was housed in a state prison. At 68 years old, his life behind bars was challenging. The prison system, known for its strict security and routine, was a stark contrast to his previous comfortable life in the Villages. Hal's health deteriorated during his incarceration, and he struggled with the isolation and the harsh reality of prison life. His family, although supportive, found it difficult to reconcile the man they knew with the crime he had committed. As time went on, the Villages returned to its usual routines.
However, the memory of Emily Harrington remained a poignant chapter in the community's history, reminding everyone of the fragile nature of life and the impact of one tragic event on many lives.